Hello, everyone. We're back, joined again by Bulge. Hello, Bulge.
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be back.
We're very
Very
pleased to
excited.
have you. Yes, it's very exciting. You're bulging quite nicely this evening, as
hmm
always.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. No one can see this, but I'm transitioned into fall clothes, and
hmm
I'm getting in touch with my inner werewolf with my
hmm
flannel. And I need to shave, so I mean, I'm playing a role here. We'll have to do this at some point, but we've been discussing that all Protestant. I've been saying that all werewolves are Protestant, all vampires are Catholic, but that's a topic for an
Yes.
upcoming stream. Hopefully, with Caleb, we got to really hash that one out. I'm trying to get
hmm
pause in on that one because we
Oh,
need
that would be
we need a
interesting.
balance. We need balance in
Yeah,
the
yeah, we
courts. We
need
need
an
yeah
equilibrium here. We
yeah
need
we need the
two
Protestants and the
representatives
Catholics.
from each
Yeah
side.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah. Speaking of spooky season, Bulge was very kind and let me harangue him into watching a spooky movie, and we're going to discuss said spooky movie. 1998's Fallen, which is so I had you seen this movie before?
I had not even heard of it. No.
It's a deep millennial cut.
hmm
Yeah, I must have seen it for the first time in 2010, I think. So I saw it well after, like I did not see it when it first came out.
hmm
Um, it's a Denzel Washington movie that I think kind of it appears to me like nobody really remembers it. They don't think they think of Training Day, great film.
hmm
They think of like Man on Fire, great film.
Yep.
Really great
Man,
film.
that's awesome.
Very Catholic film too. We should do that one at some point. They think of, like wasn't he in Glory? I think he was in Glory. Yeah, they
That
think
sounds vaguely
yeah,
familiar.
they like there's you think of these like seminal Denzel Washington films, but Fallen kind of falls maybe a bit by the
hmm
wayside, unfortunately, because it came out like when he was doing tons of movies. So it's just like
hmm
more, he was a big star at this point.
Yes.
And it it doesn't have, I think it just kind of fell by the wayside is my impression. Maybe I'm wrong in this.
Which is
But it is
surprising because it is a very good movie.
it's an outstanding film, and it's one of the best. Well, we'll get into this as we go. I do
hmm
contend it's, I'm looking it up here just briefly. Gregory Hoblet, which is a great last name, wrote it. And he also wrote another very good movie, Frequency.
I
If you've
maybe
seen
heard of that one.
Frequency.
I have not seen it, but I've
Yeah,
that name is somewhat familiar.
Frequency is also incredibly well written. It's a sci-fi movie. It's one of the better sort of time travel, kind of time travel
hmm
movies that I've seen. It's very tightly written and it kind of all makes sense, which is
hmm
impressive with time travel
Yep.
stuff. So this is not a time travel movie. It's a supernatural thriller, I think is how it was marketed. I would call it a horror film because it is. But it's incredibly well written. And
It's a horror thriller, really.
yeah, I would say I would say that this is actually okay. I'm not going to say it's my favorite horror movie of all time. It's not, but my memory was totally correct. I watched it last night for the first time in 12 years and was like, geez, I
hmm
hope I remember this correctly because I've sold this so hard to Bulge about this movie. So great. I have a pretty good memory, particularly for plot. And yes, I was like, it's even better than when I was in my early 20s watching it, I enjoyed it. When I'm in my mid 30s, I'm really enjoying it. So I think it's one of those things as you get older,
hmm
you have more time, and you realize that time is not always on your side.
Yeah, yeah. We'll
And
get to that. We'll get to
yeah, we'll
that
get to that
aspect of
whole
it.
thing.
'Cause that is genuine masterful direction, scriptwriting. I don't even know who would have been come up with it, but every time this comes up in the movie, it's great. It's my favorite sequences
The
from
movie
that
kind
movie
of
involve that.
uses the Rolling Stones sort of as a meme or plot
Yes.
device, but it's really kind of a meme in a way. And I have this. We'll do a brief overview of the plot here, but really I kind of want to talk
Yes.
about the themes. By the way, spoilers abound. Please watch the movie.
Yep.
It's like 2 hours long. You'll enjoy if you like anything spooky, creepy, supernatural, strange. You're gonna enjoy it. It's an enjoyable movie. Definitely. It's coming out of the same time period as like The Fugitive. If you've ever seen The Fugitive,
hmm
it's sort of this kind of like
Harrison
late
Ford.
90s. What's that? Harrison Ford. Yeah, Tommy
Yeah,
Lee
yeah.
Jones, The Fugitive. It's that
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that late 90s, grimy late 90s post-grunge kind of America thing. We're not quite into the total like narcissism, or not narcissism, but nihilism of post 9/11, but we're like getting
hmm
close. And like yeah, it's
Yeah,
like at
the
the
future is
time,
attacking the past. You can
yeah,
sort of feel it
Seven.
happening.
It's around the same time period as Seven, I believe.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's got
it's
the
a two
grainy.
year. I think seven is like 99. When was
Yeah,
this? 98,
this is
you said?
98. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think 7 is 99 or 2000, I think.
98 was a good year for movies, particularly
Oh
horror
yeah.
films, because you got this movie and I mean again another movie that maybe defies genre at some point, but it's one of my favorite films of all time is the original Blade is also 1998.
Blade is
And so
so, dude, that I
I
watched
love
that
that
movie
movie.
earlier this year again for the
So
first time in
good.
like 10 years. It's so awesome.
It's an amazing film. It's
The
my
opening
favorite.
sequence is the best sequence of
It's my
any like
favorite superhero
action or
movie.
superhero movie ever.
Yeah, it's so
Easily.
good. Yeah,
So good.
easily. Yeah.
Perfect.
So it was late 90s was definitely a time. Upon rewatching it, I actually was texting pause of TLE and I was like, hey, I'm watching Fallen, and he hadn't actually heard about it, and I was like, oh, you should watch it, and I was like, damn, dude, we've lost so much in this country. You watch the late 90s and you're like, wow, like
Oh
it is a
yeah.
dark film about demonic possession, and but it also but like the country itself, you're like, wow, like there was like what it's they're trying to like make Philly look bad. And Philly has its problems, by the way. Love Philly. Shout out to
Hmm.
Philly, a great city, despite what people say. But Philly in the 90s is like not looking anything like some places are today. I'm like, we've really degraded as a country, as an American, from an American perspective, like, whoa, this is like, man,
I
almost
didn't
30
even
years
come
ago.
off it thinking badly of Philly, which
No.
is the funny thing
Yeah.
because I'm an outsider here, so I
Yeah.
can provide a sort of atemporal perspective. Someone who hasn't been,
Yeah.
there for that period of time. I'm like,
Yeah.
this looks fine.
It looks
Like the
fine,
scene where
right?
all the kids are playing basketball, they tag the dads in.
Yeah.
Denzel's character, whose name I forget, was there. It's like, yeah, it looks like there's homelessness, but like I live in like Brazil, dog, so I'm like, okay, we could
Yeah.
do worse.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, you can definitely do worse in America now. And again, I'm certain that Philly had its issues back in the late 90s, but my point is that like the vibe of the show was like maybe it's for me as a nostalgia bait, kind of like member berries as a millennial. I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember when like I I remember 1998. Like
Hmm.
I remember that year, and it was and you think about what life is like now, and we sure got a lot more gadgets. That's one thing. There's one scene
Hmm.
with a cell phone. There's one scene at the end with a cell
Hmm.
phone. You're like, wow, he's got a cell phone. That's high
Hmm.
tech, right? But like, there's just like people seem to have like talking. They're actually talking to each other and coming in contact with each other, which is also a plot device.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're like, would this even be possible? Would sort of the idea of the monster even be possible in a modern world? We'll talk about that too, because I'm like, hardly anybody's coming into physical contact with
Yeah,
each other.
no, the best
Yeah.
technology for horror is like early 90s, 80s technology,
Yeah.
really. Like what you see this in horror movies all the time nowadays where they're like the writers have to come up with people are stuck in a mountain, there's like a weather event which knocks out any signal or what, like they have to contrive a scene where you're back to the 70s
Right.
technology wise basically. And
Yeah.
it's like because it's almost impossible to write it otherwise because they don't want to do like the horror of technology or something like very specific. I've seen a few writers do it. Kathy Griffin did the Blue Electric Angels in her book series, which was very interesting. But like, I've never seen a movie which did it at least very well.
Yeah.
Maybe Tetsuo the Iron Man, but that one's very weird and
I still
Japanese and
need to see
bizarre.
that one. People say it's good. It's
It's interesting.
it's interesting in Japanese.
Yeah, you should watch it, but I wouldn't go in with the expectation of it's well made and interesting. I'm not sure I would. I don't want to rewatch that movie. Don't tag me in for that
Okay,
one.
sounds good. We were talking. Maybe we could just start. So the general. So this is a possession, and like there's not even really an exorcism. So it's just a possession
No,
movie.
yeah.
About demonic possession, but
It is a world without priests, is what
it
we've
is a world
my
without priests, which is
conclusion.
interesting. And so I'm not, yeah, it's strangely without priests, although there is this concept of like the chosen few who are like
Yes.
unable to be easily demonically possessed. They have like a natural resistance or something like that
Yes,
to
and
it.
there's also the idea that some people are destined to kill these things,
Yes.
which comes into play at the climax as well. With
Yeah. Which there will
should
be
we just talk
spoilers.
about the plot? Yeah.
Yeah,
Should
yeah,
we
there's gonna
just
be a lot of
recap the
spoilers.
plot, basically? You want to do it
Yeah,
because
let's
you were
just do
watching it more
that.
recently.
We'll just do it. We'll just do it really quick here. So, love Denzel. Denzel plays Philadelphia police detective John Hobbs.
Hmm.
And he catches and gives testimony leading to the execution of a person he thinks is a serial killer, who I mean physically did commit the murders.
Mm-hmm.
Played Edgar Reese, played by Cotius, who's a great Canadian actor that never gets a lot of
Dude, he had
respect.
so few scenes, but he was amazing. I was
He's really
shocked at how good
good.
he was.
Yeah, he's a Canadian character actor who deserves a lot more credit in film in like film history than he gets.
Mm-hmm.
He was in he just been in many different things. In always kind of these weird parts, but he like full commitment to role. Um, so Reese is killed, is executed, and but before that he meets with Hobbs and is touching him and speaking in an unknown language and acting very strange, very flamboyantly, singing "Time Is on My Side."
On his way
By,
to the execution.
yeah, on his
A
way to the
great scene
execution
too.
room.
That's the
Yeah,
credit sequence. Dude,
yeah,
that was amazing. That was artful.
yes,
Here's that credit
yes, and he's like
sequence.
dancing to the song,
Yeah,
like
he's like
singing to the song.
happy.
Yeah, happy. uh he says time is on his side, and he means that quite literally,
Mm-hmm.
because big time spoiler, Reese actually isn't really the killer per
Mm-hmm.
se. He is a vessel for a demonic spirit. uh
Called Azazel.
yeah.
Which we
uh,
can talk about the
we
name and the
can talk about
etymology
that
of that,
too.
because I'm interested enough. I
they've
did some
they've
research as
fudged a little
well.
bit of the biblical archaeology. It's
Oh
fine, it's a
yes.
movie, it's a
Yeah,
movie,
it's
I don't
fine.
care.
Yeah, I
It's
didn't
a
care.
movie, yeah.
Or else I would have been on its ass about the demonology. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
care. I
the
was like, okay,
demonology is definitely its own thing, which is fine. It's a
suspect.
story.
But it's
Yeah,
fine. Yeah, I can just
it's
take
fine.
it as it goes.
Yeah. And so the whole idea is that certain demons were punished particularly in a particular way by being stripped of their form. So they
Mm-hmm.
cannot exist separate from a host for very long. They have like what, 500 cubits of movement,
Or 10 breaths. It's something like that. It's
10
there's a
breaths,
time limit
500
and
cubits.
a distance limit. There's
It's like,
both.
yeah, there's like it's a time and distance. So they can't just hang out in one place waiting for somebody to come by. And they can't they can't just they can't, it's not like they only have a certain amount of time but can move super fast. They have they're constrained. Their constraint is
Mm-hmm.
in how long they can. It's like what, 60 seconds or something, like a
It's
minute,
something
and
like
then
that. Yeah.
like a minute and then a
And
sixth of a
500
mile.
cubits. Yeah.
500 cubits. So fine, you've provided some, these are totally not attested in demon and biblical demonology, but it's fine, right? It's a
Yeah, we can
great,
take it.
yeah, it's rules for the monster. Monsters usually have to have
Yes.
some rules, right? I'm fine. um so they can pass, the spirit can pass seamlessly from touching people.
Mm-hmm.
um so bad touch, lots of
Mm-hmm.
bad touch. So by physical contact can seamlessly move through almost everybody, but not these chosen few. We later learn of which Detective Hobbs is one. So he's sort of like
Mm-hmm.
naturally resistant to possession via touch. However, once the host is killed and the demon is in like full survival freak out mode, then it can go into absolutely anyone. Fine, rules established for the monster.
Yep.
Okay, right, I'll buy
They
it.
do a good
I buy
job
it,
of
right.
establishing it early.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
get
It's
it,
just,
and
that's
they
the
never
rules. You
break it.
buy into
Yep.
it. Yeah.
And they
So
only use those. They don't introduce later ones or whatever.
yeah,
That's it.
so
You
it's a
got it.
very, it's a nicely constrained, it's a terrifying monster that's weirdly constrained at the same time, that gives you a hope of defeating it. So the idea is that you could quote unquote kill, but probably more like it'd be something like banished to hell, this spirit by forcing it to be outside of a host for 60 seconds, and preventing any sort of um potential hosts coming in its 500 cubit radius essentially in that time frame. So so it's not like an undefeatable monster theoretically, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it has weaknesses. And so the rest of the film is essentially this cat and mouse game where this entity is jumping people and taunting Reese, and then rather Hobbs, and then killing Hobbs' like closest friends, one of his family members, being part of his like his jumping into his nephew, jumping into
Mm-hmm.
his friend. It's like this terrifying thing of like who you can, and you never, the one of the things I love, if I may spurg out
Mm-hmm.
2 seconds about this, more than
Please.
2 seconds. From a filmmaking perspective, there are almost no traditional horror special effects. There's
Yeah.
actually none. There are,
Yeah.
you get demon vision, which is something
Yeah.
like
Demon Vision, and that's
demon
about it.
demon vision, which is a bit like a Tony Scott filter.
Yeah.
It's a Tony Scott filter that struck me, that this is essentially a Tony Scott filter, like skewed and a little like oversaturated. Like
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
think of
yeah.
like we were just talking about like Man on Fire or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like what he does in Man on Fire, like you know, or Domino, one of those films. Yeah, it's like
Mm-hmm.
oversaturated. That's how you know the demon is seen, which is fine, right? It works. That's just, but that's like a simple, even for the late 90s, that's a simple effect that costs you both basically nothing, right? In post-production. The way that you see, quote unquote, scare quotes, the monster is just by how people are acting
Yep.
around
A lot of the movie is
Hobbs.
dialogue and sort of mind games
Yeah.
between the two.
And so and so the when the spirit's inside a person or a host, it can choose to act as that person at purely as its demonic self or a mixture of the two, which is also terrified. And I do believe there's a bit, yeah, there's a bit where they explain in some exposition that like the people don't know that they're being inhabited. They just think this is a good idea to be doing whatever it wants me to do in this moment. They feel completely like normal. So much so
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes they don't remember how, or they just, and then when it leaves them, they don't remember what they've done. So they have
Yeah, they don't.
essentially
You get
amnesia.
this guy
Yeah.
who there's a point. I think the first guy he possesses in the movie after Reese is killed, the
Yeah.
first guy he possesses and stays for an amount of time, kills someone. And then this guy, and then he passes it on to another person, and like he disappeared for a few days from his job. He even quit his job. He threatened his
Yeah.
manager, and like he's like cooking something because that's where he was, and he's
Yeah.
calls his job. And he's like, man, I just look at the calendar, and it's like I guess I must have gotten drunk, and like he finds like he has no idea, but like to him it's like he feels normal. He doesn't
Right.
really feel like there's anything wrong. I also
Right.
really like the demon's motivations, which are so simple but so demonic.
Yeah.
Which is he just wants all humans to die. He wants to bring about the fall of civilization.
Yeah. It's
And the
pretty,
reason why they're serial killers is because there's a it's a little throwaway line where he just says it's one at a time, Hobbs. When
yeah.
Hobbs asks him about it, just one
Yeah.
at a time.
Yeah,
It's great.
because time is on his side. He
Yeah,
right, like
time is on
because
his side.
he's like I have infinite time. Well, he would
Hmm.
say, right, I have infinite chronological time. I can just do this forever, and he never gets tired. And you know, one host wears out, just moves on to another one. Like in a world full of people, there's just, I mean, how many? Well, you can tell it's in the 90s. There's 5 billion of us. There's more now, but there's at the time
Hmm.
there's roughly 5 billion potential hosts, right? And how long does a person live? Like if you had to stay in one, I mean, do the math. Like it's this for all of the demon's weaknesses, it's a very powerful foe. Like this is an
Hmm.
incredibly terrifying thing. Um,
And it's very ancient and very smart too.
oh yeah, it's just learned and it can inhabit, it can speak like any language. It can inhabit anybody and it has a penchant for singing and
Hmm. It
theatricality.
really likes the rolling. There's a great line where the final showdown
Yeah,
where John Goodman is possessed and he's taunting Hobbs, Denzel's character.
yeah.
And he sort of goes, "What was the band?" He
You
accuses him
listened
of
to the
like,
monkeys, didn't you, pussy? Yeah.
"Yeah, you ever like the Rolling Stones? Didn't think so. You listen to the monkeys, didn't you?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And Goodman steals that scene, dude.
Oh
He's
man.
so good.
Well, and I was saying too, like,
Every actor that did
oh,
the demon, even
every
the
actor. So I
small
was.
bit
They all
characters,
get.
they all were
Everyone gets to be
great.
the bad guy.
Yeah, pretty much everyone except
Everyone
Denzel.
gets to be
Even
the bad guy.
Denzel actually gets to be the bad
Denzel
guy.
does at the end. Big
Yeah,
spoiler, right?
and at the
It's
beginning, technically, because
and at the
of the
beginning.
narration.
So he's telling that like the story, but in reality, what it turns out is it's not really Denzel. It's not really Hobbs telling the story. It's
Yeah,
Azazel in the form of Hobbs telling
it's.
you the story about
I
the time he
will
almost died.
describe the opening scene. The opening scene, you see Denzel's character, whose name you don't even know yet,
Yeah.
sort of scrabbling in the woods. He looks like he's been poisoned by something. And his calm narration starts. I want to tell you about the day I almost died. I was outmatched. I was outwitted. Uh, and I want to tell you about this day. But we need to start somewhere. And then, flashback to when
Flashback. Yeah.
Reese is going to be executed. And there's these
Great.
little interjections of narration every now and then that you actually notice. I think it only really happens when the demon is closer to Denzel. Because the demon knows Denzel and knows where he lives, so he'll pass by him, and he's just a guy on the street at night or whatever.
Well,
And
yeah.
that's when narration comes in.
And the narration is not it's Denzel Washington, but it's not Hobbs. It's very much
It's
a
not.
different character. It's tonally
Yes.
different. There's humor. There's this
Yeah.
snarkiness to it. You're like,
Hmm.
what is happening? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that's not how Hobbs acts. And so, I mean, I already knew that what had happened, what was going to happen. So it's interesting watching it again 12 years later, but already knowing the main bit. I'm like, oh my God, it's just there all along. Like this
Yeah,
is
it's one
not,
of those movies that merits a rewatch because of that. Actually,
yeah.
probably is more enjoyable a little
You
because of
there's little
those
hints
moments. Yeah,
along the way.
it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it is great when you realize this is from the demon's perspective, all of
Because
this.
you for Chris for most of the movie, you're, like I actually texted this to you. Oh, they're using a Brechtian device. That's interesting. Brechtian device is basically when you tell people the end of the story in the beginning, so that
Yeah,
everyone can calm down and enjoy the story. It's what happens in Romeo and Juliet. The bard comes onto the stage,
right.
tells you all of it. You know, Brecht. You know German better than
Echt.
me.
Yeah, yeah,
Brecht.
yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
used it a lot in his plays. And I was like, okay. And then I got to the end and was like, wow, that's a great subversion of the
It's
Brechtian
a
device.
subversion.
Because you're
Yeah.
so sure until the very end, you're like, the day I almost, because when you Denzel reveals his plan, it's like he's basically going to trap the demon in his body. He's going to
Yeah.
be away from civilization, and there's going to be no host, and he's poisoned himself.
Right.
Like that's what's happened. And then you're like, oh, the day I almost died at that moment. And then like 1 minute later, you're like, oh, I see. It's great.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
And I mean, since we're jumping around and it
Yeah.
begins where it ends, that ending, holy shit. I mean, I even texted you or messaged you. I was like, dude, I mean, I knew what the ending was. I was like, dude, the ending, holy crap.
Yeah.
So,
See
so
you around.
almost kills Azazel. Azazel finds a fucking cat.
Yeah,
And
because
then
he can
this
possess
cat,
animals. This was
he can,
established before because he had
yeah,
possessed a bird.
he had
So this
possessed the
was very
bird.
this was established
Yeah.
very early on.
Yeah, he can possess animals. So it's not like a gotcha thing. It's not like a
Yeah,
stupid. It's like no, no, no. They the right again, Gregory Hoblet, the writer, amazing writer,
yeah.
like establishes that this monster, bad spirit, whatever, right? The monster can do a lot of things, including it's not just humans. And I think Hobbes just didn't grasp that like it what about anything alive? Like could it be ants? Could it be right? Like do we know? Right? Could it be like what's the limitations? And it's not
Hmm.
he sort of assumes his error is that he assumes that it can only inhabit humans. And if but he should have also known from his Bible that that spirits can inhabit
Yeah.
pigs and all
Yep.
sorts of other things. He should have probably thought about that.
Hmm.
Probably should have thought about that. But that's fine, right? Like
But he
that's
didn't see any animals. That was also to his credit.
yeah, he didn't
He
see
didn't
animals.
see the
Yeah.
cat there.
Yeah. And that line, it's just what is it like see you around, and the cat just like
Yeah,
runs off
that's
the
the
woods,
last line.
and it
Yeah, see you
fades
around.
into a slow mo like just cut of
Uh,
Philly people walking a crowded
yeah, just
street,
a crowd.
a crowd, and sympathy for the devil playing, which you're just
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, it's just like it's still there. Yeah, it's just like oh that ending. It is such a good ending, but it is so like gut punch ending. It's
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 such a dark ending too.
it's
It's great.
dark. Yeah, and
It's a
it's
really dark ending.
and I mean, true to I guess this characterization of Azazel, it's demonically funny, but there is some humor
Hmm.
to it, right? Like it's
Yes, Azazel is very
toying with the
snarky
audience.
throughout.
He's toying with the audience, right?
In
Like,
fact, even
yeah,
I kind of I chuckled to myself like
yeah,
really hard when Azazel translated the Assyrian to us because during when he meets
yeah. You
Hobbs,
motherfucker! I'll fucking
look
find
you
you. And yeah,
no,
yeah,
I'll
whatever
fuck
it is.
you up and down, left and right. If I can't
Yeah,
get inside you, I'll fuck you outside. It's
yeah.
just all this profanity. Like that's really funny.
Well, yeah. I
It's
mean, but
great.
and that's not unusual in, I guess, in documented demonic possession cases either, though, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, no,
it's
they.
so that fits for again, I mean, objective spiritual reality aside, right?
Mhm.
There is sort of a folklore, quote unquote, which doesn't mean it's not true. Don't at me, Catholic. There's
But
a
it's folk.
folklore
It's lore of the
surrounding,
folk. Yeah.
yeah, there's a folklore surrounding what demonic possession, quote unquote, looks like, scare quotes, right?
Hmm.
And so that is also in line with what it quote unquote looks like, particularly as it's shown in modern horror, right? If you, I mean, and I'm of course referencing the Exorcist here, right?
Yes.
Which, right? So that's and this movie is sort of in I think in somewhat it's definitely in dialogue with that film to a certain extent
Hmm.
because it requires a sacrifice, just as in the end of The Exorcist, right? It's
Hmm.
not a priest who's having to sacrifice himself, but it is sort of this chosen person, right? Who's sort of like chosen amongst out of people, like selected from people from the multitudes to have some sort of power,
Hmm.
at least to even if it's just a light a passive power of you he can't be possessed by touch. um he still has to sacrifice himself, and right, and like and similarly in both movies, although it's different. But just
Yes.
let me, I think
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
going to probably agree. There's a sense of I'm going to do a heroic act to fight this demonic foe, but in so doing, I'm going to severely underestimate. Like, great, you're willing to sacrifice yourself, okay, but you're underestimating how evil works, and
Yes.
you're thinking essentially. I mean, to go like to blow it all up. You're trying to sacrifice you're trying to trust your own sacrifice to defeat evil when it's Christ's sacrifice that defeats evil,
Yes.
and like the final defeat, right? So
Hmm.
it's like, yes, self-sacrifice is a virtue, but you have to do it in a way that like actually ties into the bigger sacrifice. If we're
Yes.
thinking, of like
But one with actual efficacious power.
yeah, yes, yeah. And if you're only, and the mistake is to think that if I just do this, I'll stop it. It's like, well, you might hinder it somewhat, right? You might prevent it to a certain extent, but you're not really going to be able to like defeat evil
Hmm.
completely, right? Like
No.
and this is
Yeah.
also, I mean, is anyone who listens to the show knows this, anyone who knows me, it's very Tolkienian as well. The
Hmm.
like, right, like it's not about going, like you yourself are to play your part in the battle against evil, but you have to understand that like your even the most heroic action you could do is still, and that you should still do that, but it's not like going to fix everything, right? Like it's you're limited in the scope that you can do what you should do when the scope you should do, right? That's
Yeah.
ultimately what God slash Eru Iluvatar, if you're in Middle Earth, wants from you, right? Is that like proportionate to where you're at.
Hmm.
You're not, because essentially we're all hobbits, right? We're all
Yeah.
small, like
Every
we're
part
all
in the story is
yeah.
important, but our part is indeed our individual part is indeed very small.
Yes, yes, it's all important, but yeah, but and small things are big things, but at the same
Yes.
time, you're not. Yeah, and this thing has been, as we said, has been around for well, it's been around forever in the sense of
Since the fall
outside
of
of,
man, yeah, or since
well,
the
like
fall of
it's been on
angel.
it's been on planet Earth since at least however long, and I mean, if you want to, I mean, depending on the the movie doesn't really espouse a young Earth creation idea, but it's like, so it could be
Yes.
millions of years that this thing is
Yeah.
like just
As long
going
as
through.
as long as there's an animal to possess, the first
Dinosaurs,
animal to
like, I
yeah,
mean, like,
dinosaur, yeah.
yeah, it's like this thing has been around for like it's like untold eons.
Hmm.
And you almost killed it, congratulations, right? Like, but you
It's the
didn't
day it
really.
almost died.
It almost died, yeah.
And
So
and
it's
he's so petty. It's so great. Because like
yeah.
he's not like this grandiose, sophisticated villain. He's so fucking petty and he's so banal in a
he
way.
he is
Like
not Tim Curry in Legend. He's very much
no,
that,
no.
yeah. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so great. He's just brutal and like he's extremely cunning, but his intelligence is not like I'm going to appreciate Shakespeare's literature and then murder you later. No,
Right,
he has no use for that. He'll enjoy a song because of the lyrics are ironic,
right.
for his purposes, and he'll use it to taunt you, but at the same time, he will almost only use it to taunt you. You
Yeah.
don't really see a scene of him just singing it to himself where his victims can't hear it.
He's not, well, he's incapable of joy.
Yeah, exactly. He just
He's
because at the same
incapable.
time, yeah,
Yeah,
if he
yeah.
wants to kill every living thing in the world, his mission is self-destructive, and then finally he can die in his hatred of all that exists.
Yes. It's a very, so I think I said this to, was it to you, or I forget, because I've just been talking up
Hmm.
this because I've been thinking through this movie, and and as anyone who watches this, listens to this knows, I am a very much an external processor. I have to say things aloud. So my poor
Hmm.
wife, God bless her, has been like hearing me like go through esoteric fallen bits of like, and what this says about this, and this connects to that. I think it's one of the most, I'm going to use scare quotes again, realistic, big scare quotes, depictions of supernatural evil on screen. What do I mean by that? I don't mean that these kind of rules apply to evil spirits in the actual spiritual battle that we're all a part of. That's not what I mean. What I mean
Hmm.
is, you know, there's no head spinning around,
Yep.
there's no green vomit, there's
Hmm.
no levitating off the bed 6 feet off the bed, like Ghostbusters. There's none of that. There's no like light coming out and and like, there's not like Max von Sydow being like, holy crap, what am I got myself into? There's none of this stuff, right? And I'm not hating on The Exorcist. I'm not. But I
Yes.
actually think that this is way more Actually, it's a more, it's not necessarily a scarier film, but it's like it sticks with you because you don't really see anything strange happen with your eyes, meaning the eyes of the
Hmm.
audience, right? You see a little bit of demon vision shots, okay, just to let the audience know sort of
And that's
where.
it. That's literally it in terms of
That's it.
magical stuff.
Yeah, that's it in terms of overtly supernatural stuff. What you see, so it would be easy to say, like to put yourself, it'd be easy to put yourself in the shoes of Hobbes, who was initially very skeptical, and be like, yeah, I go to church sometimes, but it's hard for me to see like something bigger or bigger importance to my actions in a world that's so chaotic. It's easy to kind of fall into that a little bit because you're not seeing like a spirit. You're not seeing Tim Curry with devil horns run around and
Yeah.
like and be like, you don't see any of that. But it doesn't mean that the forces of darkness are not there. How do you see it? In the way people are acting, and they're no longer themselves. They're literally being possessed, as in
Hmm.
owned by something that's not them, you
Hmm.
know? And the movie does a pretty good job, I think, of distinguishing between just like general fallen humans
Hmm.
and humans that are
Which,
being possessed,
yeah, it does that.
right?
The
Yeah,
little beginning dialogue with like between Gandolfini and
yeah.
Denzel is
About
actually really
cream.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
about the
the cream.
cream. Yeah, 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 yeah. Uh,
Gandolfini is great in this,
he's
but
so
he
good.
always I don't. It's probably because of his accent, but I always think of The Sopranos. He always looks
Yeah.
like kind of mafia boss to me. He could not possibly play like the honest cop in this
No, he
movie
can't be the.
because
Yeah, yeah. He cannot be the honest cop.
he's a great actor, but man, it's just you've been typecast. Sorry, buddy.
This was before. I think this was a few years before Sopranos,
This
wasn't
was, yeah, I think
it? Yeah,
Sopranos
yeah.
was 2001,
I think
2000.
so. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So, but like, so yeah, there's, it's like the movie's not like, oh, it's clearly not a Baptist horror because it's not like he had a beer, he must be possessed. We can tell who's possessed by who is drinking beer and who is dancing. It's like, no, 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 no,
Uh-huh.
no. Right. Even the corrupt cop is maybe not corrupt 24/7, which is also kind of that part of that
Yeah,
dialogue,
that
right?
was
Like,
the entire
yeah, he's
dialogue is
like, you
about
could still
this.
do some good even though you're doing some, even though you're not perfect, right? Like, so the movie, so the way that you see whether people, when people are possessed, is in that all of a sudden they're all multiple people in like a row in one scene are being like chasing one of the characters, and it's not the people, it's the spirits running through people,
Yeah,
like in a way that is actually absolutely, that's actually a terrifying scene
terrifying.
because
Yeah, no,
it's
that's one of my
terrifying.
favorite scenes.
Yeah.
My
um
three favorite scenes are probably one, the John Goodman of climax.
the
Two,
climax, yeah,
it's that specific chase scene where he
yeah,
corners a woman who's a doctor of theology who's sort of
yeah,
he murdered her dad basically
right,
years and years ago because again this is a very old being. And she since she was a kid has been kind of investigating it and she's figured this stuff out basically.
right.
And at one point she manages to throw him off basically because someone trips into him, I forget what happens, and she's running away and they're in a crowd. And so he just sort of chases her through people. For whenever he gets hit by a car, he just like reaches out with like the broken body to another person who's
Yeah,
coming to help, and just
yeah,
continues moving, just like implacably through the crowd. It's great. It's such a great little chase sequence. And the third favorite scene is the police when he goes into the police station. I was about to say
yeah.
police office. First, that's
Police
probably my
station.
Portuguese. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah,
And he goes to the police station and first possesses Gandolfini, and then just asks him a few weird questions, and then just to taunt him, moves through basically everyone in the office, singing "Time is on my side" and continuing it on the other person. And
yes,
Pobbs, who heard this guy re-singing it the last time he heard the song was this serial killer about to be executed,
yeah.
starts asking people, "What the hell were you singing?" And everyone's like, I wasn't singing anything. What
That
are you
was the other guy who
talking
was
about?"
singing. Yeah, that was the other
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah, it
do
was
not,
never a guy.
they only remember the other people, they don't remember themselves doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a terrifying film, it's a great film. We've spoiled it all. Hopefully people at this point have watched it. I have
And if you
so
haven't, it's still great because
it's
now
yeah,
you
even if,
actually know the ending.
yeah,
As Doc just proved, you can watch it again, remembering the plot pretty well, and it kind of becomes more enjoyable because you see the little hints that
oh
are
yeah,
going on. It's great.
yeah. I actually think it's one of Denzel's best films, and I really think so. And it's he's perfect. His ability to switch from good guy to Azazel is is very good. I mean, and Denzel can play good and bad guys very well. So
Yeah, he
you
can.
need all these actors
He
had to
was
have
great in Macbeth.
great in Macbeth. Yeah, great in Macbeth. And as we were talking about before we started recording,
His
John Goodman.
dialogues are all good. Like his
Yeah,
dialogue with his, it's never specified his retarded brother.
his brother's developmentally
His
disabled. Like
mentally,
yeah,
yeah, his
he's
mentally
developmentally
challenged
disabled. Yeah,
brother.
yeah, yeah,
Who's a great guy, who was also a really good actor because they never say, the only time they say anything that addresses it kind of is
yeah,
when the kid says he's a spaz when he's gonna
yeah,
tag in to play the basket. That's the only time it's ever said. But from the first scene, you can tell something is going on.
yeah.
And it's such a loving relationship too.
That was one of the things
And
that
it's very realistic too, because he
it is.
sometimes gets exasperated with him, but it's so
Yeah,
good.
yeah, it is good. I was thinking about that too. That this portrayal of this non-traditional, not in the LGBTQ sense, but like this non-traditional family that still loves each other and sticks together. I'm like that was the thing also that made me kind of nostalgic. I'm like 90s movies still showed this.
Hmm.
And from an American perspective, dealing with all the woke shit, like it's a black family who's making it work.
A black
And it's like
non-traditional
black
family who is
non-traditional
not
family,
gay.
but they don't hit you over the head with like, look at how
Yeah,
woke and progressive. It's like this is just the family. Hobbs is helping out his brother and his nephew.
they
They
don't
need
ever
to live
really
with
mention even that they're black.
yeah. I mean,
As
it's
far as
just like they're
it's never
it's
said
just portrays people in a way more
as
real
people. Yeah.
light. Yeah, it does not like you can clearly tell, at least this is my take on it. I could clearly tell that they're like, well, of course, you know, that we're of course we're gonna have a black brother and nephew because we need like we want Denzel. Like, so
Hmm.
it's like Denzel's the guy for our role. It's not like we needed this did not need to be a it could have been anybody, right? But we wanted Denzel, which is a good choice. He's a great actor. So we're just going to
Hmm.
fit some of his family pieces around him, and that's fine, right? This
Hmm.
is like in the 90s, you did not need to be like, look at our wonderful, we didn't check there's no box checking. It's just a fucking cool movie about demonic possession, right? Like,
No, the brother and the kid are great too
yeah,
because they provide tension. Like for example, it's such a great little scene where he comes home and he sees his brother beaten up,
yeah,
and he's like, "Wait, what happened?" He's like, "Just fell downstairs."
yeah,
And he's like, obviously he didn't fall down the fucking stairs and get a black eye, but like that didn't happen.
yeah,
Uh, he's like, what? No, no, like seriously, you need to tell me. And like the kid hit him,
yeah,
and you're like, oh, it's got into the kid, and he's like protecting his own child. It's like
right.
he's like, you both of you stay in, and he goes out to like meet the
The
his
friend.
brother's the friend of his
Yeah,
brother's kid, yeah, the little blonde
yeah,
kid. And it's kind of hilarious to watch it, like in retrospect. But at the moment, it's like very tense. He's chasing a child, like
yeah,
Denzel
he's
is
chasing a
chasing.
child. Yeah.
He's chasing this little blonde kid. It's a really funny. It's like, what are you gonna do when you catch her? You're gonna beat him to death.
Yeah, I
but,
mean, well, and yeah,
but
and
like,
it's
it's really tense at the moment because you're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? It's
right.
great.
Well, and it presents, and you can tell that the demon's doing this on purpose because like I'm gonna inhabit the most innocent, and so
Yeah.
that he will not, you can't do anything to me because I'm now inside this vessel that you don't want all harmed.
Hmm.
And I mean, so yeah, I can't recommend the movie enough. I really love it. If we could, I mean, I don't want to do a hard right turn, but I
Please
think
do.
this movie actually kind of quote unquote has a lot to say about like I mean, maybe evil, but also just like infection,
Hmm.
spiritual infection in general, which does
Oh, it
not
does it
necessarily,
great in
yeah,
the reporter sequence where basically after this kid sequence that we this Denzel chasing the little kid around, the
yeah,
little kid jumps into someone else's body because the
right,
little kid trips over and then someone comes over to help, and this guy just like parked his car there, and then this guy goes out to his car like quiet, pulls
yeah,
out a gun and aims it at Denzel, but they have this little standoff. When he's about to shoot, Denzel kills him.
right,
And then you realize that he's possessed another person because again
right,
of the rules we've stated. It's not that easy to kill me, he says, and just kind of walks away.
right,
And you know, at first, everyone like the police come, they investigate the witnesses or they question the witnesses, and everyone says no. This guy pulled out the gun first, and then the
right.
police and shot people and shot shot
At
a
people,
few rounds.
shot a few
Yeah,
rounds at people. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and then and then only then after a few rounds and trying to talk him down, the officer fired.
right,
But then the news comes around the next day, and these people who you can tell but no one else can are Azazel. you know,
Every single one. They're all Azazel
yeah, they
telling
all
different things.
Azazel
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
telling different things. Like, no, I did because this guy was like an upstanding citizen. He was like this guy who just, his wife
He
was
was a
pregnant with his first
school
child. He was
teacher.
a
Yeah.
yeah, he was the school teacher. But I don't actually know if this was Azazel. It might have been a detail added by Azazel, but the gun was firing blanks. I don't know if that's
Yeah, that
true.
actually no, because there was actually rounds flying and there were bullet holes, I think, and some
Yeah,
of yeah.
yeah,
So Azazel actually adds the blanks bit too to really screw with
yeah. He probably
everything.
possessed
Yeah.
the reporter and said like there were blanks.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to just destroy this guy's reputation. Because if he can't get inside him, or he can't, just kill him easily, he's just gonna kill the people around him and destroy his reputation and hope he kills himself. Because he's done
Right.
this before.
Right.
And it's fantastic. Like if this transformation, this little like segment, it's like 2 or 3 scenes in a row.
Yeah.
It's great. It's really, and this is also the scene where he has the great conversation with John Goodman about what you're here to do on Earth.
Yeah. I love
What
that bit.
great conversation. Yeah, just rainy on the two
Yeah.
of them at night in the police station. I think Goodman is smoking a cigar, which he puts out after 3 puffs,
It's
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
also a funny movie trope.
Yeah, in that scene too, it really struck me. Also, the soundtrack too. This is just a noir. It's like a supernatural noir because
Yeah,
it's rainy,
that
it's
scene
dark,
especially. That
and
scene is
there's like
super noir.
jazz kind of music. It's like
Yes, yeah.
almost expect Humphrey Bogart to like come out and be like, "I saw a demon once, never really could get him. Anyhow, doll, let's." It's just like you expect, right? Like it's like, is this like,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
yeah, that's true. That's interesting.
yeah, the rain too. I was like, oh, the rain. They're really selling it with the rain, right? Like this is just, and it's 2 in the morning. It's 2 or 3 in the morning, right? Which also is like witching hour, right? Like
Hmm.
inversion of the crucifixion. It's 3 at night, 3 in the morning. Like
Yeah.
all these little things. Yeah, but it's a great
It's
scene.
a nice little detail too, because Goodman couldn't have been possessed.
Right
In that scene.
in that scene, right?
Later things are different. But so
Yes,
it's a little break where there's just 2 characters, neither of whom neither of them are possessed, and we're just
right,
having a conversation about like fate, basically.
right.
And it's great. It's this great little calming moment before the storm hits,
Yeah,
before Act 3 begins, basically.
basically, yeah, yeah. It's a good movie, man.
Do you want to talk about the name, or do you want to
Oh,
do
we can
something
do the
else
name. Yeah,
first?
you bring it that with the name of the demon.
Yeah, that was interesting. He is, I believe, I don't know if he's mentioned elsewhere in the Bible, but Azazel is, I believe, the Jewish but ancient Hebrew word for scapegoat.
It's scapegoat.
But
Yeah,
terminologically, because I know El, or when something is anglicized in the Bible, it's El, like Gabriel, Michael.
yeah, yeah.
It means from God or of
Right.
God, or and I believe I've seen 2 different etymologies. One of them is strength of God, but I don't buy that one. The other one I've seen is division. Azaz means division or something like that. Which was interesting. And in the book of the apocryphal book of Enoch, Azazel is one of the demons who produced Nephilim, and he is the one who taught people the arts of basically makeup and forging bladed weapons. Which is why in pretty much every piece of fiction I've seen of him, and by every piece of fiction I mean one other piece of fiction, Master and Margarita by Mikhail
Okay.
Bulgakov, which is a
Yeah.
fantastic book.
I need to read it. I need to read it. It's
It's
on my
so,
list.
dude,
Yeah.
you'll like Azazello. There is surprisingly similar to this one. He's very snarky. He's very suddenly violent, but he's
Yeah.
sort of reined in by Monsieur Voland, this supposedly German man who is really Vidal. And
Yeah.
it's interest, and it's very, very, it's great. I highly recommend it. But still, uh, he's always a shapeshifter. Like
Right.
what he wears, he's called Azazello because he pretends to be Italian in Master and Margarita.
Okay.
He like what he looks like is not what he is. All the time he
Right.
transforms in the when moonlight hits him. He's called actually. There's a great little like 2 lines I want to read here. Let me see. Yeah, now, what this is transformation. As after his transformation, this is how he describes in Master Margarita. Azazello's eyes were both the same, empty and black, and his face was white and cold. Now Azazello flew in his true form as the demon of the waterless desert, the killer demon. And it's just a great little
Super
thing
metal.
where he's always a killer. And
Right.
he's always very violent and petty It's sort of there's no sophistication to him. He's contrasted with Monsieur Volant, who is sophisticated
Right.
in Master and Margarita, but he's just kind of a brute. And he is the same here. I thought that was interesting that they both. I think they must have done research because, or maybe for the name Azazel, because what's the most fitting demonic name for someone who shifts form? The guy who
Yeah.
taught humanity how to do makeup, basically.
Right. Yeah, basically. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I didn't know that about his the yeah. I just knew the connection to the scapegoat. And
Hmm.
my understanding, and I'm not an expert at this at all, is that he's the connection there semantically is something like the goat that you place your sins on is eaten by the
Hmm.
demon of the wilderness.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was yeah. But there's a couple like most of this, um like most demonology, there's like several different versions of these
Yes.
spirits, and
Hmm.
like there's different, sometimes contrasting or not necessarily contrasting takes on what they really do. This is just like I mean, I'm talking to a Catholic, so you're going to agree with me.
Hmm.
The Bible does not
Hmm.
give like a absolutely clear view of how demonic entities
No. Yeah.
operate.
No. There's
It
plenty of
gives hints,
speculation.
but it does not like again, no Baptists listen to this, so it's fine. But
Hmm.
like it's not like it's not airtight in a scientific sense, right? Like it's not the science, right? Like
No, there's plenty to interpret.
yeah, like what does this really
you can
mean?
even interpret Legion in many ways. I think C.S. Lewis has an interesting point that he makes both in his fiction and his nonfiction writings. That if we're to take personality, if the glory of God is a human being fully alive, and personality is included in that, then we have to assume the demons have the least personality possible to operate as rational spirits. They have to be almost personality-less. It's this
Right,
banal cruelty. Every facet of personality that you would see in a possessed person or a demonic activity is just a weapon. It's
right,
just something to hurt. It's not like they don't have a self as we would understand
right.
selves, which is in it. Again, he is not, this is not
Yeah,
for Catholics dogma, and for the rest of you, it's not biblical, but it is an
right.
interpretation consistent with the biblical canon, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
it is. Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's from that hideous strength, right? That he really gets into that,
He
or
gets into that, especially in that hideous strength. In
yeah,
Paralandra, you see it.
Paralandra, yeah, with
You
the endless
see it in
repetition or
Wesson
whatever it is,
with the what?
the endless
Yeah,
questioning
yeah,
thing.
where
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
so banal and it's very Azazel in this movie where he just prevents him from sleeping. And like, he'll talk high
yeah,
philosophy with the lady, as she's called in the book. But the moment he realizes he can't tempt her for the day to break one of God's rules, he just goes away and starts torturing small animals. Like that's all he does.
yeah,
It's just he just does like okay, and then he just kind of crouches down and crawls away and starts like just vivisecting like alien frogs. It's such
yeah.
it's great. Like he doesn't have a personality. These are just weapons.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean they're not, maybe again this is just sort of we're speaking mythopoetically here, but maybe it's
Hmm.
they're not really. I think this is something that this dovetails with something that I've been sort of thinking about, and informs it a bit, like thinking about it for years. Like I think, in art, whether that's literature, music, film,
Hmm.
what have you, I think obviously you need to portray evil. If you're going to portray evil, you should do a good job of it. And I don't think that there's
Yes.
one way to do it well.
No,
Um,
there's many
but
sorts of evils.
it's tempting to, pun intended, it's
Hmm.
tempting to say like, well, like the most evil spirit must be like the worst person. And you're like, well, I mean, you can do that to great effect, but if we go with this more Lewisian, I hate that term, but we need to find a best thing
Hmm.
that sounds better, a Lewisian frame,
Hmm.
that like it's actually, they're not fallen selves. They're not fallen human selves. They're not like a tyrant human is not the same thing as a demon necessarily, right? They're both evil, but it's like it manifests differently because it's the twisting of different things, right? So the twisting of a
Hmm.
human is going to be different than the twisting of an angel, right? Like
Yes.
it's twisted differently in different materials, so to speak, right? Like
Yes.
it's like one is corporeal, and so the
These are
twisting,
completely different kinds. This
yeah,
the way to imagine an angel. This is actually one of the few uses of modern abstract art. You can sort of see there's been a few cubist paintings or what is it, futurist paintings of the crucifixion, which I quite like, but they're very weird. But one of the best ways to imagine an angel or a demon is not to just imagine yourself without a body and you can see everything and you're partly outside of time, partly in time, you won't be able to imagine that. It's not
Yeah.
just you taken to this other dimension. The best way to do it is visually. It's through like this futurist cubist painting with like different colors of like this app. That's probably the best way to see it. It's this alien thing to your experience. Uh it just happens to share rationality with you almost. It's
Yeah.
almost if there wasn't a god, it'd be a cosmic coincidence. But as there's a purpose to it. But
Right.
it's 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 ver- it's like the difference between us and like a cat. It's like it's not just the rationality and the way we are it makes us like we're degrees of separation from a cat. We are
Right.
a different kind of being because of our rationality, because of the Imago Dei. They are a different kind of being entirely. And
Right.
if Saint Thomas Aquinas' speculations are correct, even between themselves, every angel is indifferent in kind, not even degree.
Interesting.
Which is an interesting. Again, this is not
Yeah.
even doctrine because
Yeah. It's
other theologians of his time disagree with him, but
yeah.
it is an interesting idea.
Yes. Yeah. No. And even though you are a totally different kind of being or creature than cats, you still shouldn't eat them or sacrifice them to voodoo god.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Very bad.
Topical. Yeah.
Topical. See what I did there?
And there is a cat at the end. That's the last animal he
Yeah, there is a
possesses.
cat. I actually really like cats. So yes,
I
the
love
recent
them.
news makes me incredibly livid. Regardless of who is doing it, I honestly don't even care. It shouldn't be happening at all. And I will, in order to get this channel not shut down, I will refrain from saying what I think should
Mhm.
happen. Um,
Cats
yes,
are very noble animals, and
cats are
we've known
noble.
that for a long time,
Yes,
since at least ancient Egypt.
they reduce pestilence carrying critters called rats. And so yeah, we need more cats. I love the cats, American cats, the greatest cats in the world. We need more of them, not fewer of them. We need more of them. Um, a strong tomcat is the spirit of America. Yeah, it's just um,
More, not fewer. More,
not more,
not
many
fewer.
more. Yeah, particularly
Way
the
more.
orange ones. I love the orange ones, obviously. Um, yeah. Uh, the yeah, the no, those are all very good points. I think so. Something that really struck to or came to mind quite vividly last night when I was watching this, rewatching it, was the concept of virality, and that this
Hmm.
was made before the internet was a real. I mean, there was the internet. And there's a scene where he's looking up stuff on Yahoo, which is so fun.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah. Yeah, that
Yahoo!
was funny.
Yeah, like dial up Yahoo is like great,
Ah,
great. Yeah,
memories.
yeah, yeah. But this is made before what we know of the internet was real. Like there was
Mhm.
no like there was no terminally online people who
He
weren't.
wasn't asking autists on Twitter or Facebook about
Yeah,
the demon, which is what
yeah.
he should have done if this
He
was
probably
made
should have.
today.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
should have asked Paz. Honestly, he should have
Yeah,
actually
pause
DM'd
actually.
Paz.
No joke. Pause is very pause. Pause tests my knowledge. He knows in some ways more than I. I only know like
If
the
you
yeah.
ever
I know
find
like
yourself in a horror
one
movie
kind.
plot, I
Yeah.
know who I'm DMing first.
Oh, yeah. You should also let me know because I'm good in like two areas of it. But yeah, pause overall has the grand scheme of things.
If
Everyone
I
should listen
ever
to on
if
Earth.
I
But
ever
yeah,
see a German creature or a doppelganger or something like that, I'll be sure to
or
message you
gnomes
first
and
and then
elves.
Paz.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I've actually had dealings with them. If you've listened to my Scarlet Thread appearances, I actually
I
100%
do
had.
need to.
Yeah, I actually had a thing happen. In any case,
Okay.
it was
I will
not
listen.
demonic. I was pretty clearly it was not demonic. I mean, I don't want to say it wasn't, but it didn't act like any sort of demonic act. It was a trickster activity. It wasn't really designed to hurt or
Hmm.
make anyone despair.
It was its own little thing.
It was its own thing. Yeah. It definitely
A
was not.
different kingdom from the demonic or angelic or human intruding upon ours.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally allow for this is an aside, but it still has to do with the spiritual world, so it works. I totally allow for and I'm fairly confident it exists a sort of a tertiary level of like neither angel nor demon, kind of its own. There might be other things out there that are not necessarily
Yeah.
good or evil. They're kind of just doing their own thing. You know, they're just kind of like I don't even know if they're involved. I think they might just be doing their own thing. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, in most I say
yeah,
folklore, I mean you really in fantasy, in Christian fantasy, these beings, aside from Lewis, really, Lewis is very much on the every rational being is ensouled and they're all saved.
yeah,
They
yeah,
all love Christ. Um,
yeah,
but other fantasy, John C. Wright actually has a great post about this. Where a lot of fantasy since the 60s, especially written by Christian authors, um, has a lot of them not being ensouled in the way that they can't be saved or damned. They just
Right.
stop after when they die. They just it's over. It's done.
Yeah.
Like some theologians think about animals, when it's over, God will make animals in the new heavens, but when this animal dies, it's like it's done. Others, like Saint
I do
Francis, would
not
say,
hold to that view at
yeah,
all,
I don't
sir.
either.
Yeah.
I don't
I'm a
either.
St. Francis as respecter,
Yeah,
and
Saint Francis is
yeah, I'm
very,
like,
and the Bonaventure and
I
Scotus
can't,
lines are like
my
that.
whole
They're
thing is
consistent
this,
lines.
like, this is an aside of an aside, but that's fine. It's my show. I can do whatever the heck I want to. Um, I think, okay, so I'm not a Billy Graham fan at all, but a
Hmm.
broken clock can be right twice a day. And Billy Graham actually had a good way of viewing, do animals go to heaven? He didn't really give an answer, but he had sort of a view, right? It's like this lady asked him, this might be apocryphal, and it doesn't even matter if it's apocryphal, right? Because it's still an interesting idea.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm fairly confident this really happened. And
Hmm.
it's crazy for me to be quoting Billy Graham in a positive light because I really don't like him. But hey, I got to give credit, right? Truth,
Yeah.
I will put, I find
Yeah.
truth. I'm
Always
like,
credit truth. Yeah.
that's like, yeah. Slady's like, well, I really love. I think it was her cat, like, or her dog,
Hmm.
or one of her pets. Like, will he be in heaven? And he says, well, do you feel like that this cat? Do you feel like God gave you this cat or this dog or this pet for a reason? Yeah. She's like, help me through all sorts of darkness and stuff. And I was like, so it increases your joy. Yeah. He's like, so why wouldn't God want to increase your joy beyond all measure in heaven? And I'm like, so he didn't say yes or no, but I'm like, that is a way to view it. That I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, like I feel
Yeah.
like,
There is Scotus makes this argument for
yeah,
the Immaculate Conception before it was dogma, like 5 centuries before the Catholic Church made it dogma for us. Where it's like I think it's I forget the Latin, but it's fitting God could do it, therefore God did it.
right.
In a way, it's like
Yeah.
it's his argument for like why it's plausible. It's not a proof of it, but it's his argument for why it was plausible to believe
Yeah.
in the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah. And I mean,
It,
yeah. And
it
I,
fits narratively in a way,
right. Yeah.
and it's not impossible metaphysically. God can't make a
Yeah.
square circle because that's
Exactly.
nonsense. It's not a thing that you can even refer to.
I mean, yeah, and,
So
and
God
I'm
did it.
just yeah, and I'm just me. What do I know? I mean, really, truly,
Mhm.
what the hell do I know? Not much. But I look at my dog is great, and I love my dog, and I'm like, I
Mhm.
can't like I this is not random. None of this
Mhm.
is random. Like, and if it's the goodness I derive from the dog just from her life, I'm still very thankful for her,
Mhm.
right? Like because this is not random. But I'm like, this is not random, and I don't understand the purpose of it being temporally constrained. Like it just to me that doesn't make sense. And
Yeah, I
I'm
just mentioned it
like
because that was the way that
yeah,
I've seen it
no, I know.
in modern fantasy. At least since the 60s, I don't actually know much about fantasy before Lord of the Rings, basically. So I guess
Yeah,
50s. Um, but yeah, I think probably the most popular urban fantasy series I know of the Dresden Files pretty much
yeah,
is that where there is the Christians are just right in that universe. Like God, like there's a lot of demonic and angelic activity, and it's like I don't know if Jim Busher's a practicing Christian. He was certainly raised in some American evangelical denomination, but he
yeah,
has a fairly robust knowledge of Catholicism um, from the Catholic characters in his books. But pretty much all the Fae,
yeah.
they're neither damned nor
They're
saved. They're
just doing
just
their thing.
there. They have a purpose. They actually do serve a purpose in the story. They have a cosmic purpose, but at the end of the day, when they die, it's that's it.
Well, if I can share an aside of an aside, we'll get back to this. All has to do with the spiritual world, folks. So this is all connected.
Uh-huh.
And what is fallen if not? This is essentially a Christian fantasy movie.
Yeah, it very
Essentially,
much is.
effectively, is what it
It's an
is, right?
urban fantasy movie. Yeah,
Urban fantasy. I mean, no, really. I keep
it
thinking
really
there's
is.
actually, if anyone here plays Delta Green, there's a Delta Green scenario that is clearly inspired by this. In fact, I'm wondering how they didn't get sued. Uh, I've actually run that scenario for people and was thinking, oh my gosh, this is Fallen. But okay, yeah, it was really fun and unsettling. And I had seen the movie before, so I made it very spooky for the people playing. They hadn't seen the movie. We're like, um, like there's a Norwegian folktale about this man is like riding around at night and like every time he passes this one hill he hears these weeping, moaning, and crying, and it's the elves and they won't shut up. Weeping,
Mhm.
moaning, or no, it's no, he's no. First part of the story is the elves start messing with this guy. He's like, "Would you please leave me alone? You know that God won't save you." you're all damned like the demons. And they're like, oh, and then for like days afterwards, every time he goes by this one mound, they're like, oh my gosh, we're damned, like full despair mode. We're damned, we're damned, we're
We're
worst
fucked.
thing ever, damned, we're damned, we're damned. And so he like they won't shut up. So he didn't solve his problem because he wanted them to stop messing with him. Now they just won't shut up. And so like
Uh-huh.
I think it's probably because it's a European folktale. On the third night, I think it's the third night,
Mhm.
he comes by like, wait, gnashing of teeth, we're the worst. But like not like when they're not reveling in their damnation. They're like they feel like convicted. That's very like Lutheran folktale. Oh, I feel convicted, right? Like I feel
Yeah.
convicted. And so then he gives him a little bit from a Lutheran perspective because it's Scandinavian. He gave
Yeah.
him the
Yep.
law. He lets him stew for 3 days with the law, and then he gives him the gospel. Maybe not the gospel per se, but he's like, okay, I can't tell you what God's going to do, but you should pray and have hope, and maybe you will make it to heaven. And then there's silence, and then he finally has peace and quiet. So
Mhm.
like it's like so I mean that's kind of my stance on it, is like I can't tell
Yeah.
you Christ didn't
No, I
come to
can't
save
tell.
you,
That's
but
just what
I
I
hope
usually
I
know
hope
from
he
like
makes everything whole, which would
yeah.
include if there are elves, and I'm fairly confident they are, particularly in the past few months because I've had weird stuff happen. I'm like, I hope that they also attain salvation somehow. It's not
Ver-
my job to worry about
mhm.
that, thank
There's an
God. But
old
yeah,
Irish
yeah,
folk tale. I believe it's Irish. Is it Saint Muir? I forget her name, but basically this mermaid,
yeah,
who's very much a mermaid out of like the Odyssey, like the same type of creature, at
yeah,
least in her function, if not appearance, because I forget how they're described in the Odyssey. Um, basically she's lived for hundreds of years, but she's still kind of a girl mentally. They're not all of them are not very mature. But one day there's this it's a legend about this saint, really. I forget which missionary saint this was.
Palumba.
And I don't remember. I'll
Yeah.
need to check. Just put mermaid who became a saint, and you'll probably find this legend.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and basically, mermaids are kind of wicked creatures by nature. Um, but she hears this guy preaching the gospel to the sailor, and she's, throughout the day, she sort of comes closer and then presents herself, and she becomes convicted. And when she takes she wants nothing more than to go to heaven at this point. She's lived for however long. And the first time she receives the Eucharist, she dies, but she does go to heaven. She is indeed saved. God has granted her wish. It's an alternate perspective from they're soulless creatures. There's old
Right.
folklore
Yeah.
about this is not how they're viewed necessarily. They might be soulless until they get the gospel, maybe.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know how. Yeah, they
Yeah.
might
No.
just last until the end of time. Otherwise, I
Right.
don't know.
I'm not an expert in Celtic Christianity at all, but that seems in line with what I've read. That like the goal wasn't seen not just as to save human souls, but to save the other folk as well, like the fair
It's to
folk who
save
might
the
have,
world. Yeah.
yeah, to save the whole world. And so I have hope from that. In any case, back to demons.
Yep.
Um, so like this was made before like viral videos, before viral anything, but it is literally
Hmm.
it's one of the better filmic depictions of virality I've ever seen.
Oh
And
yeah.
if we can replace Azazel with anything that runs through people, idea
Azazel is a meme.
Azazel is a
He's
meme.
almost literally a meme.
He's a meme.
He's one of the best depictions of a meme because
Yeah, he's a meme.
I think other writers have done this where just ideas spread and the idea almost becomes a character. Cyberpunk novels have done this with like
Cyberpunk is known for
viruses
this.
and other
Yeah,
stuff. It's this this virus which is not conscious, which is different from Azazel. But it sort of becomes a character in itself as it possesses people because it has an objective. It's a
right,
computer program. It wants to do something. And again, words just because that's why viruses are, they're great for allegories for demonic stories because they don't have a personality. Azazel does, but
right.
that also kind of adds the mimetic idea because there is a unity to him that you can see that you don't need to stretch for
And he
allegory with
does he
viruses
does
to
gain
provide
knowledge
it.
from every person he possesses. That's
Yes,
established in the he's like it's established in the when the guy when he's like I'll know in 2 seconds when he's like foreplay,
yeah.
he's about to touch her, yeah, like he's like he does gain the knowledge of every person he possesses.
Not
So
only that, when he possessed the guy who came to help the kid, he knew there was a gun in the car.
yeah,
There was no,
yeah,
because it was a hidden gun. There was no way he could have
there was
possibly
no
known
way
it
he could have known
otherwise.
that, yeah, yeah. So it's yeah, it's I mean it's a me he's a meme, and
Hmm.
he's a dark meme. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't help. So obviously the first time I watched this, I hadn't, and I'm not going to say I'm an expert in this because I'm not, but I hadn't read any Nick Land.
Yeah, I
And
was gonna actually mention Nick Land. He's
watching
in
that
his
now, I'm
Nick
like,
Land. This is a
this
depiction
is
of a
the
meme.
outside. This is the capital
Yeah, this is the
outside, and
outside.
it's
Yep.
moving through people, and you're like, where's it from? I don't know, out somewhere else, right? And like, we're all participating in it now. Do we want to? I don't know if we have a choice, right? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, like there's again, I think Gregory Hoblet was just writing a good spooky story and did a
Hmm.
great job screenwriting. But I mean, I think he's knowingly or unknowingly kind of like is catching on to something about how ideas move through people. Um, and I love the idea of this has always been going on. Denzel Washington's character Hobbs discovers that it's always been going on. It's
Hmm.
nothing new, as the Bible says. There's nothing new under the sun.
Under the
He's just
sun.
like, oh my gosh, I'm peeling back, and there's this whole thing about right him getting through the book of Revelations. But what is an apocalypse if not a tearing away, a revealing, right, of like
Hmm.
what's actually going on?
Yeah, N.T.
And
Wright has the great. He describes it as the pulling back of a curtain after a magic trick.
yeah,
It's a great little depiction of what apocalypse or revelation is.
yeah, and so I can't help but think that like in the story, right, like his revelation comes from like personal encounter with dark memes. The
Yep.
but and for us, like obviously been listening to, I mean, I've been talking about this on the show before. I've been listening to past few years, I've been listening to a lot of Jonathan Pajot, and so like thinking of like a symbolic view of technology, particularly of internet technology, information technology, right, like I mean, I have no answers to these questions, but the movie just really brought them back to the forefront of my mind. Is like, how do you tell the difference between like just a regular meme and like a demon?
Hmm.
And I'm like, I don't know if I can actually tell the difference, like truthfully, because sometimes it's hard to know. It's hard to know an idea's true destination or true intention,
Or where
uh,
it comes from.
where it comes from and what its purpose is. And it can seem one way and be another way, right? And vice versa, right? It can seem bad and be good, or vice versa, or it can be some other thing else all together. But you're clearly being confronted by a very strong meme. And like, how are you supposed to stand in the face of that? I mean, these are all questions I mean, there's no real answer, and the movie
Hmm.
doesn't give you an answer too. And the fact that Hobbs dies in his attempt to overcome this meme because he
Hmm.
completely, but he has an innate talent, God given, but he also kind of underestimates, or
He
I think
overlooks a detail,
he
really.
overlooks a detail which was very important. Um, I don't know, like
It's not
I could
even a detail that you can possibly really fault him for, because maybe the cat just wandered in. I don't think
right.
was he in any establishing shot of the location? I don't think
No,
he was.
but it looked like the cat was living under the floorboards
Yeah,
of the abandoned
yeah.
cabin.
It's like,
So
yeah, it's this thing where like, okay, I don't see any animals here. I don't see any tracks. So we'll
right,
be fine. But it's a small creature. It's
right,
recently snowed. Probably
yeah,
any tracks from the other day are covered up.
right,
It's like, yeah, it's just like this one small thing, just because of how powerful. It's not even like physically powerful, just how it operates. You
right.
overlook one small detail, you're screwed.
Like obviously I could sit here and talk forever about that, but I'm really curious. But will you does that do you find any strong resonances with that idea in like our current era of anything like meme magic,
Hmm.
AI, um,
Oh yeah,
like
I really like I really like especially depictions of demonic or depictions of AI that are demonic. So depictions of demonic that are reminiscent of AI in the sense that they don't have a self. In a
right,
sense, the demonic kind of is a almost a prophecy of AI or C.S. Lewis's version of it.
yeah,
In the sense that there is no self here. It's almost an algorithm being followed, and it will use a bunch. It has a bunch of tools in its toolbox, and when it encounters a problem, it'll run like a while loop or run a different one if like it's not in that condition. It'll just run all these loops. When it encounters a problem that doesn't work, it'll wait a bit and then it'll try again, and maybe it'll learn things and it will get better next time if you don't just kill it. Which is what
right,
happens in Paralandra. Basically, you need to just kill it, which is
yes,
it's a great little scene where it's like, I can't like talk this guy, like I can't win this battle of ideas. This guy's gonna cause basically another fall
right.
of man in this different world, and like he basically gets almost a personal message from God saying, "Kill it," like just literally beat it to death.
Yeah,
It's like you just need to fight. You stop with this pansy ass shit. You just need to like punch it to death until it stops moving. That's what you
Yeah,
need to do.
pretty much.
It's a great move. It's like such a great scene. It's actually really well written too. It's like emotionally resonant, but it's really funny to describe what's actually happening. God telling you you need to punch this guy to death right now. I'm just telling
It's
you.
yeah,
And like AI that is written as if it's demonic. Christopher Rocchio is probably my favorite working sci-fi writer. He hate me if he heard me say this. He's a science fantasy writer, really.
oh, okay.
Um, is what he calls himself, and he doesn't really believe in the distinction between sci-fi and fantasy. We can get into that in another stream, which is an
Yeah,
interesting topic in and of itself.
yeah,
But he basically says because one of his books has AI, and he doesn't elaborate on it because it's like a first-person account. It's like an actual document in the world he's doing, and this guy kind of
right.
just has to use it for a while. It's sort of like Dune. It's been outlawed, but it's a plot device for one point. And in an interview, he said like one of the more interesting things is if AI is metaphysically impossible to generate consciousness, where does it come from if there is a consciousness there? Which is another interesting thing. If like we just know by reason, just by metaphysical reasoning, AI can't generate consciousness, and then you get an AI, it passes all the Turing tests, it passes any advanced tests
Yeah,
that we can make for consciousness. You're like, well, where did it come from then? Because it didn't
right.
come from here. It didn't come from the circuits. Versus, again, bringing it back to Nick Land, there's an outside here,
Yes.
capital O.
Yeah.
So I really like that. There's a very cool mirroring between demons and AI, especially in perception of them in fantasy or science
Yeah.
fantasy, I should say,
Yeah.
which I think is both very accurate and very interesting. Because like even since the beginning of AI, there's the prophecies of doom.
Yeah.
Terminator. Nick Bostrom talks about it even when he believes in the singularity. And he's kind of an AI optimist. He's still afraid of it. Everyone who talks about AI, Nick Land go over all the debates in Xenosystems, and he's cheering for the demise of humanity because he's a pro intelligence guy, not a pro humanity guy.
Which is insane.
Which is so
Yeah.
funny, dude. He writes so charmingly, but he's such a nihilist. It's
Oh,
so
I
funny.
know. Yeah.
But he's fun
He's
to
one of my
read, man.
favorite. He's one of the few nihilists I can actually read. I can stomach reading. I
Yeah,
don't.
I can because
Yeah.
he's so charming.
Oh
There's
yeah.
this sort of British humor to him. It's so good.
Are
But
you trying to say
yeah, I really like that.
a man of wealth and taste?
Oh, yeah, indeed, indeed. And we
Anyhow,
guessed his name already, though, so there's no more
yeah,
fun to
yeah.
do.
You don't need to say it. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I took from this movie. That even back then, in the demonic, it wasn't conscious, but you can kind of see it. This mirroring between science fiction or science fantasy depictions of AI and older urban fantasy or even fantasy depictions of the demonic, and
Well, which
they
goes back
seem to be
to
converging.
well, yeah, which goes all the way back to mythological depictions of the demonic. Because, like, what is
Hmm.
Fallen if not a pop culture urban fantasy reinterpretation of like essentially apocryphal Jewish slash Christian texts, right?
Yeah.
Like about yeah, like so it's nothing is really new. But yeah, the for me it was like listening to a lot of Jonathan Pajot and then him talking about sort of like subtle bodies, spiritual subtle bodies of spirits and like the ability for spirits to subtly work through because they don't have physical bodies, work through like work inside of physical or metaphysical structures, like idea structures, like that spirits can run through ideas, which I don't know why that wasn't clear to me before, probably because I was raised in an enlightenment world, but I was like, holy
Hmm.
shit, that makes perfect sense. And it also accounts for like, I don't want to say for everything, but it accounts for a lot of things that I like starting to notice things, but you can't really make sense of it. You're like, oh yeah, maybe it is maybe the internet. I mean, and this is again, this is why me and my fellow he comes on sometimes my fellow co-host Elliot talk about being meta modern because it's like at some point you realize okay if postmodernism is I reject objective truth but then I'm confronted by all these things what do I have to do I must I guess accelerate through that somehow out of that reach escape velocity
Hmm.
you can call that maybe meta modern or whatever you want to call it but in reality what you're doing is you're just going back to a pre-modern understanding of the world is full of spirits work through the world they work through your mind they work through ideas which is what I
Yeah.
mean that
I have
predates
two comments
Christianity
on
that's
that. Yeah.
ancient that's the most ancient
That's
I
really
mean
old. Yeah.
like that
I
is
mean, the
actually
next
that's
best thing to possession
animism
is mimetic virality. That's
I
the
mean
next best thing.
yeah
It's
yeah
to sort of have an idea in the world which serves your purposes and have it spread.
Well,
And
and
as far
we
as Sutler too, you can't be exercised.
right. Well, we have this theory too that we've espoused on the channel a bit here. You don't have to agree with it. It's more of a theory. It's just an idea that like the logos is the meme of all memes, and so
Uh-huh.
like there's because it's the most compelling meme.
Mhm.
It's the most memetic of all memes. Uh,
It's the archetype to use
yeah,
Jungian terms.
right. Yeah, and this so I actually so again, this is to say thank you for watching and coming on because this I think this is it, like I said, it's a fun movie, but it's also an example of almost an unintentional it sort of was sort of prophetic in that it's like this is going to happen with your
Hmm.
with this device called a phone. It's no longer for talking to people. It's so that that scene where the touching of the hands and running through people like that is
Yeah,
going to
it's so that
literally
happens. Yeah,
happen now, and
you can see it happen on Twitter, dog,
you're gonna
all the
see it
time.
happen, and it's gonna freak, and it actually probably should freak you the fuck out when you see it.
Yeah.
Like whether it's good or bad, I'm not saying it's all demonic, but I'm saying it should still, it's incredibly uncanny. It should make you, it's sehr unheimlich. It's very it should make you feel incredibly
I mean, if you want to be
yeah,
uneasy for like a whole day, even a whole
yeah.
week, just watch one of like those basically snuff videos from the Ukraine war and just don't watch the video. That'll be really bad for yourself. Just go to the comments. Just read the comments, brother. And you're like,
Watching,
oh, this is basically this is Azazel, like in
yeah,
action.
watching. This is, if I may, since you brought a good point, if I may.
Yes.
Um, so I have embraced disagreeability in my 30s.
Uh-huh.
You know, going back to church, embracing disagreeability, trying to do the things right, try
Yep.
to be the best version of myself, all these things. Um, and when I hear, it's very common in Seattle, Washington to hear, but we just need to support Ukraine. And I get in these
That's so
conversations
funny. That's
with
already a
people.
joke. It's common to hear in Seattle, Washington.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
need
yeah,
to
but
support.
we just need to. And my response is something. So I've tried multiple texts. So I have people. So there's the absolute leftists who only care about Israel Palestine. Then there's the neolibs who really do care about, who really want us to support Ukraine. And then there's these moderates. So I don't talk to the crazies. I talk to moderates because my whole thing is I want to try to talk to moderates because moderates are more like salvageable. Because I
Yeah.
used to be a moderate. That's part of it. Is I
Hmm.
used to be one up until recently. So I used to be one. So I know how they think. Right? I get what you're saying. And so I was trying to explain, okay, like, but why, you know, sort of more like boilerplate paleo con, but why are we supporting other people when we're have fentanyl, all the things like are very
Hmm.
logical, but our system's falling apart. Why would, and they're like, yeah, but we just need to stand against it in the face of tyranny. And so what I did, I had a bad day. And I don't even feel guilty about doing this because I think it was the correct thing to do. Um, I said, well, so you support the war, you know, to this person who's a nice person. I'm not going to call him out. Oh,
Yeah.
so you support the war against Russia? Oh, yeah, I totally do. I'm like, would you be willing to remotely pull the trigger on a Russian teenage conscript and shoot them in the face dead? I
Hmm.
straight up asked that, and there was no response. And I said, well, we need to send arms. I'm like, which will be used to shoot a Russian teenage conscript in the face dead. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, I let my autism just ride. And they were like, I was like, well, we need to support them. Like, when you say support them, you mean killing people. That's
Yeah.
what it's literally what
Specifically,
you
it's
mean.
a war.
Yeah. Are you unwilling and you're not even willing to kill these people? And I basically then said something like, you are completely without honor. You're not even
Yeah.
willing to like go into you're not unwilling. You want other people to die for a cause you don't care enough about you don't care enough about to kill for. And I mean, yeah, because it's true. It's like that's what war is. It's just killing
Yeah.
people.
Like if you believe that
Yeah,
the Ukrainian war is a just war, that
right.
you shouldn't, is a just war so far in the sense that every peace offer has been unacceptable or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's met all the criteria for just war theory,
Yeah. Well,
whatever your preference for it is.
I wasn't going from an
Yeah, no, but
Augustinian
like if
perspective.
you do believe that,
Yeah.
you have to say yes. Like, yeah, this man who has been forced against his will to come up to me, I
Right.
do actually need to kill him for the common good.
Right.
I just need to do it. You'd say,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd have to be willing to. I wouldn't like it,
Yes.
but I'd have to say, yeah.
Yeah.
If
I
my
said,
country was invaded by, I don't fucking know, the British Empire back when it was frightening and
yeah,
existed, back when it was like powerful and scary. It's like and like there was this young man who was kind of in his dreams of adventure, and I was going to face him, and
yeah,
he just saw all this bloodshed, he was wrong. I'd have to kill him. Like I'd
right,
maybe offer him a chance to surrender if I could, but if I couldn't, I'd just pull the trigger.
right,
Like I wouldn't like it, I wouldn't derive any joy from it, but I'd
right.
have to say,
Well, and
yeah,
to be fair, I didn't ask this person, would you like it? I said, would you do
yeah,
it?
exactly. That's the thing. Because I
Yeah,
think they were taking maybe joy from participating in a cause,
yeah,
not from supporting a war, because that hadn't maybe even processed. Like,
yeah,
the war is just the name. Like, it didn't logically go, what does war entail?
yeah.
That
I mean,
didn't
and
really go through.
I haven't been in war, and I hope I never am in war, but I have talked to people who survived wars, and their perspective on violence is very different. And so
Uh-huh.
I default to their understanding because they've actually been through it. And I
Hmm.
and so that's just informed my, understanding of this. And again, in the conversation with this person, we weren't even talking about I wasn't trying to do Augustinian just war arguments or any of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I'm
Exactly. You don't need
actually, as much as I like Augustine, I'm actually far more like a little bit more realist in that. I'm like, sometimes
no,
war
but yeah, no.
I don't know what yours, but yeah. But I was just saying, would you participate in
Yeah,
this?
you need to be
And they
able to say,
said
yeah, if you're supporting
no.
it, or else sue
And I
for
was like, well, you're
peace.
paying for somebody else to do it, which strikes me as just incredibly dishonorable. And it's a dishonorable action because you're not willing to stand by what's happening, but you're also not willing to call it out and say no. And you have the audacity to insinuate that I'm sort of somehow pro-Russian because I don't want people to kill each other. It's just it blew my mind, and it was one of these situations where this person was not like gleefully was not reveling in the bloodshed, but was
Yes.
just sort of like, but we need to stay the course. I'm like, well, but you're
I don't
not
think the
even.
bloodshed enters the mind for the
It doesn't. It was
moderates.
trying to
It's
take
only
the
the
bloodshed
fanatics,
out.
the
It was the
fanatics.
fantasy of the war,
Yeah.
and I was first off, I thought, holy shit, this person needs to read Tolkien because somebody who's survived trench warfare and works those themes quite well into the fiction of
He
like,
really just needs to read the introduction to the American edition, where he
yeah,
kind of goes, if I was talking about the Great War, if this was an allegory for the Great War, everyone would have died except like one guy. Because
yeah,
that's what happened to me. Every one of my friends died
yes,
except one.
yeah,
And I was there for 1 year. He doesn't mention this. He was there for 1 year
yeah,
until he got trench foot and had to be moved out. And
yeah,
everyone he knew died.
yes,
That's how bad it was.
yeah. Um, you can't fathom that kind of most Americans cannot. Some can, but most American civilians cannot fathom that level of carnage unless you're growing up in like really bad neighborhoods in Chicago or Baltimore. Maybe you could. Then you maybe could, right? Some really rough and
Yeah.
tumble parts. No, like some rough and tumble parts
Yeah,
of
no,
American
that's
cities,
rough, man.
like East
Some
LA.
parts of
There's
Brazil
places
too. It's like
where, yeah,
higher
you can,
casualty rate than actual ongoing wars at the
yeah,
moment.
yeah.
It's like rough.
But this person was not one of those people, and so I was just like, hey, just be internally consistent. But yeah, so but even that I think was an instance of me coming up against a kind of mimetic infection, and I was trying to like
there definitely
punch
is.
through, and the defense the like the antibodies were coming out at my like little
Uh-huh.
meat particles, and it was like this
Yeah.
back and forth. But what you bring up is something of the gleeful comments of like, I just love watching
Yeah,
Russians.
that's
I'm
Azazel.
like,
That's
I
Azazel
can't
completely.
process like this is such an
I can't it's so foreign to me.
I'm not well, so here's the thing. I like to think of it is foreign to me and that I have a reaction against it, which is a good thing. But then I can also easily the reason I don't look at the reactions is because I can easily see not myself falling into that particular
Oh, I
honeypot,
can definitely see
but I can
myself
see
falling in
myself falling
righteous
into
indignation or
other
something like that.
honeypots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see myself doing the same with like taking joy in being angry and like basically becoming a Pharisee,
Yes.
in being superior to them and reveling in
Oh,
that. So I
and
can
I
definitely see
and
that.
I know that I also, and if I'm going to be completely honest, I know that I do that all the time.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, I
definitely.
mean, I totally do that all the time. And
Mhm.
we keep quoting Lewis, but it's the bit, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's like thing about like, we're talking about Nazis during World
Mhm.
War II. It's easy to think of them as inherently different than us and very inhuman, but in reality,
Mhm.
they're just like worse versions of us, right?
Yeah.
Like, and we could become them if we're not careful, right?
Yeah,
Like,
great
we are,
book on the subject is Ordinary Men. Jordan Peterson, I think, recommends it literally all the fucking time. But
yeah,
it's not a mean book. It's genuinely very good. About the police, basically the police squadron that was posted to occupy Poland, who I don't think they were in the Einsatzgruppen, but who basically carried out parts of the Holocaust.
Right.
And the reason basically they didn't desert because they were offered it several, not desert, but they were offered like different posts back in Germany several
Right.
times. Like we can put military officers here if you're not comfortable. They said no because they assumed it'd be an act of cowardice to abandon the rest of the guys to do this dirty work.
Right.
And it was just like it's almost like there's a point of honor, their camaraderie there in the service of something evil. And you could easily do that. Like
Oh
you
yeah.
can easily be like, I'm not going to abandon my friend to, like we're doing something ugly, but I'm not going to abandon him to do it together. That's everyone can see how they would fall into that,
Yeah.
right? Just friendship and camaraderie.
Well, yeah.
Very Augustinian even. If
Well,
you've
yeah.
read the Confessions.
I also know. I also know that. Okay, I'm not going to say I'm a virtuous person, but if I do have a virtue, it's probably loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm worried about that getting perverted, right? I'm worried about my
Yes.
loyalty being twisted. So I'm like, be very careful, right? Be very careful because you're a very loyal person. And once I lock in, to use an Alex Jones term, once I lock in, I lock in. Yeah, once I lock in, I am very locked in. No, that's just true. Like I
Uh-huh.
know this about myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so I would be very worried about that. But yeah, like yeah, see, you can see Azazel in Twitter, definitely, like particularly in the war comments, like
Oh
which is
yeah.
just
There's a great comment by it was in TLE actually. I think it was Lee and Berg were talking. Lee had a
yeah,
very insightful comment. It's like, you haven't earned seeing that. You
right,
haven't gone to
yes,
combat. You
yeah,
haven't been there. You haven't been shelled. You haven't shelled people. You haven't shot at people. You haven't been shot. Like, you kind of need to earn that. To like like, it's not a
yeah,
privilege in the sense that it's a good thing, but it is a privilege in the sense that it ought be restricted to people who are there, not this hyper real video space from a
yeah.
drone.
I remember
It's
that
like
comment.
you
Yeah.
shouldn't see that. That's what that and talking about shooting dolphins are the only two things I remember from that episode.
Well, I remember that comment, and I remember agreeing with it, but then also having, I mean, I'm not a veteran, so I don't know anything. But then I mean, there was a period, particularly there was a period where I would watch some more of the Ukraine stuff.
Hmm.
And I've sort of stopped. But my reasoning behind it could have totally been flawed, was that this is being done effectively in my name. And so
Mm.
I should maybe be a little traumatized because while I don't want this to be happening in my name, it is. And so I probably do bear some response. This is an incredibly Protestant way of viewing this. I bear
Yes.
responsibility for this. So maybe I should be somewhat traumatized by it.
I should lash myself
Yeah,
away.
well, I mean, a little bit, right? Like, because I'm like, and it was not gleeful watching. I was like, this is like one of the
No, of
worst
course
things I've
not.
ever
Or
seen.
else
But
it
like,
would miss the point.
this is being done to support the global American empire, and this is what we
And I am
stand
a
for.
citizen of the global
And I
American
am
empire,
unfortunately, I
therefore.
mean, yeah, if I just want to be a citizen of America, not the global American empire,
Yeah,
right? Like, it's like
but de facto,
but de
you
facto I
are.
am, right, and I don't want to be, but I also love my country. But this is horrific. I will say I don't recommend anyone don't watch
No,
traumatizing videos.
no.
But I will say it totally galvanized me, and I don't think I would have made that comment to that
Mhm.
other person about, do you support shooting Russian teenagers in the
Yeah,
face,
no.
had I not
If
watched it.
there will be some, because I remember being like 12 and watching an ISIS beheading.
Jeez
Um,
Louise, I can't do that. Yeah.
but it was like I stumbled on it on like Twitter, not Twitter, YouTube. It was censored, but he was essentially sawing like a 12-year-old boy's head off with a knife.
Yeah.
It wasn't a clean chop. It was like just a big knife.
Jeez Louise.
And that did kind of like, no, that did kind of really stick with me, and I think it does really change my entire stance on war
Yeah.
and kind of really informs my idea of what is a just war in the sense of like, no, yeah, sometimes you just need to fight and kill people, and sometimes but
Well,
also it's very bad and bloody.
yeah.
Like you need to have that perspective, and again, I don't recommend you show your 12-year-old a video of an I do
Don't
not.
do that.
That is
We do not
not what I
advocate
am
this.
recommending.
Yeah.
You can definitely get them to be mature people about without doing that. But because I stumbled on that, I do think it helped inform this perspective. So I understand where you're coming from, but I
Yeah.
will say I do not feel myself obligated to. I know there's like Brazilian peacekeeping forces in the Congo. Like they're UN troops, but
Yeah.
the leaders of Brazil. I don't feel indebted to watch like a snuff video of like the Congo or whatever
Yeah.
because there's Brazilian armed forces there.
Yeah. I
Like
mean,
I don't feel forced.
I'm not saying my idea wasn't misguided. I'm just saying it did
Yeah,
produce
no, I get it.
quite
No, I
strong.
understand that sort of that sense of
Yeah. Like,
responsibility. I should watch this because this is like my fault.
yeah. 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 It is my fault. Well, it's my country's fault. Right.
Hmm.
And yeah, but that, I mean, then this is just, it's all right. We're on several tangents. It's fine.
Hmm.
It's a Friday night, but yeah, like I mean, I guess we could maybe tie that back in a little bit to the concept of, or the question regarding responsibility, right? Like, I
Hmm.
just kept thinking about that when watching the movie. Like, yeah, like how responsible are these people for their actions while possessed? I mean, like, in a way, they're totally not, but in a way, it's like, but they're human and they're fallen.
Hmm.
So then they're susceptible to it, right? And it's like, it doesn't even in some like, well, this I guess would get into questions of like anthropology in a theological sense
Yeah,
of like, I am Protestant, so I would be like, well, of course everyone's susceptible to it because we all
yeah.
have something inherently wrong with us that we're just born with,
Hmm.
right? Well, and I know that you would agree in a way, but not in the outcome. It's
Yeah,
like,
unless
yeah,
there is
yeah,
some exception made by God, but yeah,
right,
like
like,
I'd say maybe the Virgin Mary could never be possessed, but pretty much everyone else, unless there's some saint, some one random autistic Catholic who watches this video is gonna catch me out. It's like,
yeah,
I got
no,
you.
there's one, yeah, there's
I
one,
got
yeah,
you. There's like three others, Saint Peter, Damien, Felder, whatever. I
yeah, it's
think
like,
that's a theologian. I shouldn't have said that, but yeah.
yeah,
I think that's a real guy. Accidentally, I swear I was trying to make up a name. I fell into a real name of a real Franciscan theologian. I think Peter Damien Felder. But anyway,
yeah,
he's just this guy. I'm like, okay, fair enough.
right,
But my point is like, yeah, if you need like a God saying no, you're not gonna get that person for
right,
that to happen. It's
right.
but by our nature ourselves, like no, it's
Yeah, so
you're
how, like,
susceptible.
so it begs the question, I don't know if there's an answer, but how guilty is like Reese at the beginning, right? Like,
Hmm.
and the to give it credit, the movie does not attempt to answer that question, but it was something
Yeah,
that was
because
going
by
through my
its
mind
own
of like,
rules, by the rules it's
yeah,
established, it kind of can't. Because by the rules it's established, it's like it doesn't seem to be uncovering a deep, dark part of you. It's like this thing is like in control now. Like
right,
you're in the back seat, this guy is driving the car.
yeah,
It pushes you away.
right,
So it can't. So the movie itself can't answer that, but it does raise the question. When you watch and you're kind of pondering to yourself, it's like what's really happening here with all these people.
yeah,
Uh, but it can't. But by its own rules, it's very wise to not attempt to answer that. It kind of would
yeah,
have.
probably, yeah. But
But yeah,
I mean,
no, it
for
does
me, it's
raise
like,
the
how
responsibility of
guilty is any
possession.
of I mean, they're kind of all and not simultaneously, yes and no, in a way, right? Like,
Hmm.
paradox, it's a total paradox. That's my mind on it, is it's a total paradox, like,
Hmm.
because they're all kind of susceptible, so then they're culpable in a way, right? Like, in a way, and like, if you can't run away fast enough, you'll get possessed. Well, I don't know if that's like a moral failing, right? That you
Hmm.
can't run fast enough. But then on the other hand, it's like, but you're still like, something is wrong with you, right?
Hmm.
You have something wrong with you that allows the demon to do this, right? And even if you don't want to be possessed, right? Like, it's not like everyone that gets possessed is leading in like a completely debaucherous lifestyle. Not necessarily. It's just like,
Hmm.
just can go into anybody except this chosen handful. And it's not like they're leading perfect lives either. So there's no like
Hmm.
apparent, like the movie does a good job
Reason
of
for it.
yeah, there's not like the movie takes reason out of it, which was great. I love
Yeah.
that. There's not like a reason. It's just like, it is what it is,
There's
man.
not like you can tell who is chosen because they are righteous, upstanding.
Yeah,
No, like no. Like Hobbes actually happens to be a pretty good guy.
right,
Uh, but it's like but it is played off as like as because he's the hero of the movie and he's supposed to be sympathetic.
right,
That's why he's a good guy. But it's very much like you can't really tell. Like the only way we can tell is he touched you, was obviously trying to possess you, and it didn't work. That's the
right.
or he didn't possess you already because if he could, he would have done so.
He would have done it already. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only way we can know that you're one of the chosen. It's literally just by if you weren't, you'd be gone. Like you wouldn't be
Right.
here with
Yeah.
us. We wouldn't be talking.
Yeah. Well, it's also making me realize here too now, like, it is interesting that like, I mean, this might just be complete. I'm going free associating here, but it's okay. Uh, like, I mean, if you're Christian and you've been baptized, then you've technically undergone an exorcism, right? Like, and that's
Yeah.
the thing. Yeah, it's like you've been exorcised in a way. And so, like, I don't know, right? Like, it's like, but the movie doesn't go deep into this theology, right? Like, it doesn't
No.
say, well, if you're baptized Christian, you're immune to this. It doesn't. It
Yeah,
really
no. It has
can
its
go
own
to
little
anyone.
made up theology.
Yeah, yeah.
They again, it's kind of funny in retrospect. Hobbes never thinks like, I should contact a fucking priest about
There's
this.
a scene
Like
in the
maybe
church.
the Vatican knows something.
Yeah,
There's a
there's this
scene in a church, in a high church looking place.
looked
Might
Catholic.
be Lutheran, might
It
it might
looked
be
Catholic.
it
That was
looks
pretty
Catholic as
Catholic.
hell,
Yeah,
but it could be like weird Luther. Like it's never like made clear what
right.
it is explicitly. You never see the priest there. It's like empty except for Denzel and the woman whose name I unfortunately
Let
sadly
me look it
forget.
up here. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Greta.
aside and it's like a 1 minute, 2 minute scene. It's a great scene, but still, where she's like, I thought if I was just a little good little girl, God would spare me from this. But it's kind of we all have to face our trials. You can't just hope
Yeah,
it'll
yeah,
pass you over, pass
yeah.
over. Haha.
Uh,
You can't just hope for that.
right.
But there isn't like a priest. There's they don't ever attend the
Yeah.
mass. They don't ever ask for holy water. They don't do any. They don't even really do any of the horror tropes or any of the like. Yo, does the Vatican know about this? Is there like a professional demon hunter guy we
Right.
can
Yeah.
call?
Gonna call Vin Diesel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can we call
Yeah.
Vin
Yeah.
Diesel
Vin
over?
Diesel, I'm the witch hunter. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
seen this before. Yeah. And then
Yeah,
he
can
says like
Riddick show up here to
yeah,
save
he
us?
shows up, he drives up in a Dodge Challenger and he says for family and then just runs Azazel over. But it
Yeah.
turns out it was the same car that Nicolas Cage used to escape from hell and drive
Oh
angry.
yeah,
And
in Drive
therefore,
Angry.
see what he's done? He's defeated the devil by using the devil's car. It's like this cosmic
Yeah.
inversion.
Could be
That's the
really
movie.
funny if he
That's
lures
the
them
movie I
out to
want to
like
see.
an abandoned place, runs him over, but the car is faster than the spirit. That's
Have you
also a
seen
very.
Drive Angry?
Of course I have. I've seen it like twice. I
Okay,
remember seeing
okay.
it
I
in.
was gonna
I'm
say,
one of the
yeah.
5 people in the world, including you, who has seen that movie.
I
I
thought you were
am.
gonna. I
No one
have the
else would
special
have gotten
edition
that
Blu-ray.
reference. I don't. I'm not that crazy, but I did. But I did recently. Well, downloaded with ambiguous legal status. I'll
I
say that
I don't
because I don't
judge
think
or
it's
turn
on
you in.
Netflix. I don't
Yes,
think
yeah.
it's on Netflix Brazil. But I'll leave it ambiguous as to how I got my hands on it. But I did
Well,
watch it like a year
there
ago
there's
again.
this theory that connects that movie and Charlie Daniels to and it's a distinctly American demonology that we'll have to explore at some point here in
Oh,
Spooky.
that'd be interesting because I can kind of see the
Yeah,
American action movie, not action movie, but maybe popular movie, maybe summer blockbuster movie. I don't know.
yeah.
Forming the demonology.
Yeah, it's like this
That'd be
weird,
interesting.
like idiosyncratic, bizarre, like film land
Yeah.
demonology where you're like, okay, I guess this is how. Yeah, there's a distinctly American optimism to both of those, like to all these things of just like if we just have a big enough car, if I just play the field good enough, then my American exceptionalism will literally make me immune to divine powers. And you're
To
like,
demons. Yeah,
this is the most
I'm
American
gonna
thing ever.
run over that
Yeah, I'll just
demon.
run him over. Yeah. Detroit Steel will defeat demons 24. If you think about
I mean, this
Supernatural,
devil went down to Georgia. If I play
Devil Went
this
Down to
fiddle well
Georgia,
enough.
bring in also shows like Supernatural as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're
yeah.
driving around America, you're
If I
killing
shoot him
demons in a
hard enough
car.
with a 12 gauge shotgun,
Yes,
I'm
it's
gonna
just,
win.
yeah, I'm going to literally win. Yes,
God is on my side because he gave me this 12 gauge shotgun right
exactly. And
here.
if he weren't
And
on my
that's
side, I
how I
wouldn't
know.
have it. If he
Yeah, and
didn't want me to use it, I would not have it in my hands right now.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's I
It's
mean,
so American and I kind of love it. It's
it
so
is.
schlocky and
It is very
I
schlocky.
love
Yeah.
it. I love it to death. It's so
This
much
movie,
fun.
this movie, thankfully doesn't fall into that. But yeah, no, the maybe a
Yeah,
place where
no,
we can
it's
sort of
very much it's almost a deconstruction of that because there's very
yeah,
little action. Like action is there's really only in the climax and like one shooting. That's not really action.
it's
But
not
there are
really an
like
action.
chase
Yeah,
sequences which are
right.
not traditional at all because again he's moving through bodies,
Yeah,
which kind of substitute for the action. But most of it is mind games, very tense dialogue, or with this one scene in John Goodman at night,
yeah,
very sort of I don't know, contemplative dialogue. It's very well
yeah,
written. The dialogue is great.
yeah.
Um, and it kind of substitutes for that. If I'd almost, it's almost like we're gonna do the opposite of whatever the schlock is. It has
Yeah,
like a schlocky premise because it's almost like the monster of the week. It has these rules that this is what it's gonna
right.
do,
Yep.
and that we're never gonna touch anything outside of this. There isn't like a deeper world beyond it, like the Vatican. Like no denomination exists. Churches are just around,
Yeah,
and they
churches are
exist.
around.
Yeah, they exist as buildings, but
Yeah.
all the pastors, priests have died. They've gone away. They've been
It
raptured.
yeah, it is a, like I mean maybe I guess I could say too that it's a it's a horror film that has high church aesthetics but radically low church theology, kind of like that
Yes,
there's this chosen
radically.
few drawn from the laity, right? Who and they're the special ones. And
Hmm.
it's very interesting. And
But they
yeah,
can
I mean,
still fail, which is almost very high church.
which is yeah, it plays with
It's
these
this
kind of
nice little mix.
it's a
Yeah,
mix.
it's
Yeah, it's very
interesting.
strange. I guess I'll just finish up by saying a few things. I within
Hmm.
in the church scene, I was like, oh, that makes sense. You'd meet in a church so you can meet and not worry about the demon
Yeah, I
jumping
was also
people.
curious. Can he jump? Can he go to the?
Can
Can
he
he
go
even
to
enter a
church?
church? Yeah,
Right, yeah. And I mean, is it like in, have you seen the movie Angel Heart?
I don't think so.
Oh, we should probably, that one has an interesting demonology as well. That's like an
Okay,
undefeatable evil. Yeah, there's a scene, I won't even spoil it because it's actually an interesting
okay.
film.
I will look it up
Yeah,
and
is this like Angel Heart
bookmark it.
rules? Can the devil go to church, right? And like, so I'm gonna like, it's interesting because you almost want them to be like, oh, we're in church now. We can communicate with each other. We don't have to worry about getting possessed in here. They don't do that. And it was interesting too, because when he's
Hmm.
first having when Hobbs is first talking to Greta and they're like in that square,
Public
public
space. Yeah.
square, they're on a compass rose on the ground.
Uh huh.
And I don't know if this was done on purpose, but when there's like a above shot, it's almost like I mean, the compass rose literally looks like a magic circle.
Ooh,
Um,
that's true. I didn't
and
even
it's
think of
like
that.
they're using that as like a safe space to talk because like
Hmm.
and I don't know if that was done on purpose. It's like, oh, like it can't get into that safe. It like the two places where they really have the dark the deep talks are like what is essentially a magic circle or a church. It interesting. The as we've been saying, there's a lot of like things thrown at you. The movie doesn't really play with them because the movie one is like again, it's like I say, it's the most realistic supernatural horror film I can think of because there's not this whammy. There's not like
Hmm.
there's not the cross, there's not the relic, there's not the holy water. There's like no sacramentality to any of it. It's just this
Hmm.
kind of like insane kind of like we say mix of high and low church Christian traditions plus like the only way to really kill a demon is to shoot its host and hope it nobody if like it starves on its way out. It's like this
Yeah.
really it's very fun in a way. I can't think of any other film that really has a demon that works like that. Um, I don't know. Maybe somebody in the comments maybe will notice something. But yeah, it's I still really love it. I think it's a great film. It's a great if you watch it nowadays, it's a great meditation. As anachronistic as it might be, it's a great meditation on like virality, how
Hmm.
ideas pass through people, being careful about like as I said before, on like your spiritual hygiene, like
Yeah.
what is like what are you where are you orientating yourself, right? How are you doing that, right? Like are you what is where are you looking towards? Because it's really easy for things to get in you, right? It's easier
Hmm.
for ideas to get in you than you think. It's easy for somebody else's ideas to get in you or something else's ideas to get in you. Yeah, it's a very unsettling film, very unsatisfying ending, but hey, like evil
It's
can
satisfying. It's just not pleasant.
it's not
You feel
pleasant.
it's narratively satisfying.
It's
You feel
narratively
like the
satisfying.
narrative has been accomplished. Um, there is a certain catharsis, despite the fact that the hero loses. Because there is a narrative arc that you can see
Yeah, well,
visually, and the hero loses heroically. Like
hero
he does, it's
loses.
not like oh he runs away
Yeah,
and then the thing kills him, and then that would be unsatisfying. But the
hero
hero
loses.
dies here tragically. It
Yes.
becomes a tragedy instead of like a heroic story in a
Yeah,
way.
hero dies tragically. One could even say is somehow kind of I mean, but who also died tragically as martyrs. So there's kind of like a martyrdom kind of to this,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah, very much.
you weren't
Willingly
able
too, facing that, like knowing he was going to die, he
knowing he
went.
was going to
Yeah.
die and still going to try this desperate last act
Uh-huh.
move to try to do something. Evil, spoiler everyone, still exists. Evil has not been defeated by one man. well,
by a 12 gauge
not
shotgun.
by this one man,
Yeah.
let's say. Evil will see you around. That I really
Yes,
like
see
that.
you
See you
around. That was a
around
great
because
last line.
that is a warning to us. Is like a good horror has a warning, and it's
Hmm.
evil will see you around, and evil does not go away. But in a way too, right? Hobbs dies, but in that defeat, it's also kind of a victory because Azazel can't get him
Yeah,
anymore.
he
Now,
can't use
Azazel
his body either.
can't use his body is done. So
Hmm.
there's sort of a there's something of a white pill tucked away underneath, but it's a horror movie, right? In the
Hmm.
end, and so it's like evil's still out there.
And
It
there
reminds
is the little hint that there are still the good guys, because
they're also
she
the good
does
guys,
mention there's an organization. She doesn't know names, she
right?
doesn't know faces. There's just a few phone numbers. We've
Yeah,
talked sometimes, but they're out there and they're fighting the good fight.
yeah.
That's
That's
all we know. They're almost
all
it's
we know.
almost like angels. Like I don't know
Yeah,
names, I don't know faces. I just know they're
yeah,
out there and they're fighting the good fight.
yeah.
That's all I know.
And it again, I don't think this was done purposely, but I'm going to do it because I'm
Hmm.
autistic and it's my show.
Yep.
There is something similar to the ending of Halloween, and that Michael Myers
Huh.
is still out there, and you hear his breathing still at the last few
Yeah,
scenes, the
yeah.
last few shots of Halloween. You hear his breathing, and it's like there's something kind of I love when horror movies do this because you're like it's it's never really over
Hmm.
until you die, and death is like as we've been talking about outside the episode, death is awful, but it is kind of also the gift of Arrow Iluvatar in that
Yes.
it like that is the end. Evil, assuming you are with God, that's the last bit of evil, that's the last thing evil can do to you, right? Like that's the
Yep.
last little thing it can get from you, and it's horrible, but then that's it. It's like it's used you up, and then it has
In
to
the
go back
sense,
away.
time is like the last time time is on my side is sung is by
Yeah,
Denzel before
right.
he's possessed when he's poisoning himself and he's
Yeah,
the only other person around. We
exactly.
don't think there's any other animals. But in a way, he was right. It's like if he died such a heroic death, he's probably with God and
Right,
he's out of his demon's clutches and he's
right,
probably with his brother.
right.
In a way, at the end, the time was on his side.
Right. And if you think about time, like when the demon says, okay, time, he's big on time is on my side, but he's
Hmm.
thinking, I mean, in a chronological sense, yeah, I got all this chronological
Yeah.
time. But from a kairotic perspective, it's like God is going to remake all of this.
Yes,
And you're
exactly.
gonna be like you have no hope of ever being part of that. So actually, time is not on your side. This is my stance is that the whole reason
They're
the
very
demon
materialistic demons
the
naturally. They
demon is
focus on the
yeah,
now.
he's now.
They
Yeah,
can't win the big war,
he
so
can't win
it's
it.
like every little skirmish.
It's just a cope. It really is just
Yeah,
a cope. And like
it's
this
code.
song, it's all a cope.
That's why they're so petty.
Right.
It's because, or else they wouldn't be demons, but it's just like you have to be petty to realize you've lost the war for basically like selfishness and evil. And like,
Yeah.
I'm still gonna bring people down with me no matter what.
Well, it reminds me a bit of well, and maybe with this, it reminds me a bit of that Dostoevsky quote, right? Like, and the worst thing of all is that you just do betrayed yourself for
For
nothing.
nothing. Yeah,
For
crime and punishment.
nothing.
It's
Yeah. It's
great.
like for nothing. Yeah. And that's what you'll be left with. So yeah, I mean, it's still such a great ending. I highly recommend people watch the movie, even if you haven't watched it and you watch the end of this episode and we spoiled everything. You like, but Bulge said,
It's
still
still good.
watch it. It's really
It's
good.
incredibly well made. Trust me. I was expecting like B tier directing or editing. I was expecting like something a little subpar, but pretty much all the movie kind of impressed me. There are some scenes that will really stick with me, especially the musical choices.
Yeah.
Like that will like again, this really made me see. I think you mentioned this off the show. This made me see time is on my side in a whole different way.
Yes.
Same here. Like I just hear the song differently now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, it's a great movie. All the actors are great. The script is tight and neat. There are a few oddities, like we mentioned. Every priest was raptured or mysteriously
They were
disappeared. They're
busy.
just, yeah, they're busy, dog. They got other shit to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, they can't worry about Zazel or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got stuff. Yeah, they're fighting. We're
They're
fighting other
working on a
things.
parish council. They got parish council
Yeah,
meetings and
they
that
got. Yeah,
budgetary meetings coming up. The archbishop told me I got to be part of that. So yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. They're off. They're off somewhere else. They
Yeah.
can't help right now.
Yeah.
But aside from like these little like I guess world building quote unquote oddities, it's a really tightly written movie. Very good visually. All the chase sequences and the body snatching, very well done. It's it very it knows how much violence to use or how much violence to depict. Because the demon does kill people violently. It's like multiple, but it knows how to do that in a way where it's like not reveling in the gore or
Yeah,
whatever. It's a fairly clean movie. It's much like Seven, where like
yeah, seven.
Seven, what like the roughest part of the movie is a description brief of the knife strap on, basically. I
Right.
don't know if you remember. It
Yeah,
never shown, not even like in the shadows or whatever.
right.
It's one of the roughest scenes in cinema I've ever seen, man.
Yeah, me too.
Like that's what really stuck with me from them. And it's just like people talking. It's
Right.
the same thing here. It's like in the sense that nothing visually is gonna be like, oh man, this is gonna give me nightmares or whatever. But just the talking, it's gonna stick with you. You can ponder it. Highly enjoyable thriller too. And it will kind of, the demon is charming and snarky in a certain way, but also petty and banal. Denzel is great. The family dynamic is great. Everything is really well done. Very much worth your time.
I'm glad you liked it. I think it's a film that deserves more love. It's part of the
It
reason also
does.
why I wanted to do an episode on it. It deserves some love. Bulge, thank you so much for coming on. Would you like to shout out yourself, other things going on? I mean,
Uh,
say what you want. You don't have to, but if there's something,
sure. I am nominally on Twitter in the sense that my account is active, and I may be using a VPN every now and then, but
you would
it
never
doesn't work very
dream
well.
of doing that.
No, no, I wouldn't. I've talked with the Supreme Court, and
Yes.
we've come to an agreement. They let me use it 30 minutes a day, but that's about it.
Okay.
So I don't use a VPN. It's just we've reached an agreement. But I guess I'm on Twitter as available username spelt weirdly. You'll probably even find me or Bulgakov's Behemoth, which is one of my favorite characters in fiction, who happens to be a demonic cat in Mikhail Bulgakov's Master and Margarita. Um, and I occasionally write for our friend Caleb's Substack Thomas reviews.
Yeah, I'll link
I
to
should
that.
actually finish the article that I've been working on for a while, if I even remember it, what I was doing. I know there was like one or two I was working on, so maybe you'll see something from me. But I know several of my friends do write on there with some regularity, so you can find their stuff there. You can also find mine. But that's about everything I have to shill. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. Please, I mean, all the things. I don't know how much YouTube really lets people. You're probably finding this video via Twitter because YouTube hates me.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. I also have opinions about YouTube.
The Algo
Nothing
gods
like
are not
Brazil. We're
friendly.
not at a Brazil level yet, but that's our
Yes.
future. That's our future.
Uh-huh.
Um, Pretty
The
soon,
Brazilification of the world.
the Brazilification, and I don't want to say amen to that. No, God forbid. But
God
it's
forbid.
yeah, God
God
forbid it.
forbid Brazil becomes Brazilified.
Yeah, I know.
Even that would be bad.
I know. I'm sad about what's happened to you guys. I like caipirinhas and Brazilian food too much. I think
I
it's
love
sad.
Brazil. I'm just sad
Yeah.
it's Brazil.
Yeah. It's nice people. Yeah,
I
it's
love
great
everyone
food. Yeah.
there. I'm
I've
just
done
sad
some
they're here.
I've done some of your jujitsu before. It's great. I
Yeah.
think it's awesome. But yeah, it's a shame. Um, I'll see what order this comes out. This may come out
Mhm.
after or before. Good friend of the show, Fred, is coming back on. We're going to talk about some Charles Dickens ghost stories coming up here.
Oh hell yeah.
Getting into spooky season. Anyhow, everyone, take it easy. Enjoy your weekend or whenever you listen to this. Bulge, thanks again, and let's have you on again. You're always welcome to come back on. And
Hell yeah.
movies, books, whatever
Hmm.
I'm open to your ideas, and hopefully people enjoy seeing you here. Since you have to now parasitically jump on your American friends
Yeah.
channels, you have to touch us and pass into our channel.
Yes, I do.
You cannot operate on your own. So
Same with Twitter. Whenever I want to tell someone, yo, I'm on Discord, I need to reach other people to tell them on Twitter. But I even need to get them to send a friend invite because I just can't talk to them.
well, you like I think you're a man of wealth and taste, but you're not that man
Mhm.
of wealth and taste, and so you're
I am
welcome.
not that
So
man.
yeah, yeah. All right. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Mhm.